This is the Literary License Podcast with your hosts, Vicky Ray, John Wilson, and Keith Shorgo. Discussing book to screen and everything in between. Coming at you from the UK and USA.
They keep it real.
Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder? What is a life for two guys? Some people are better off dead. Like your wife and my father, for instance. Now, let's say that you'd like to get rid of your wife.
It's a morbid thought.
No. Just suppose. Let's say that you had a very good reason.
No, let's
say. Now, you'd be afraid to kill her. You know why? You'd get caught. And what would trip you up? The motive. Now here's my idea.
I'm afraid I haven't got time to listen.
Listen, it's so simple, too. Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders.
Swap murders?
Each fellow does the other fellow's murder. Then there's nothing to connect them. Each one has murdered a total stranger. Like, you do my murder, I do yours.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and today we'll be discovering Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on the Train, the 1951 film, and the Patricia Highsmith's novel, Strangers on the Train, 1950. And before we get started, let's find out who's with us. And today we have the director, writer, and producer of Czenzi and Otto films, which are available on Amazon Prime, and Say You Love the Devil, Dave Campfield. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Great. How you doing, Keith?
Oh, I'm just groovy. And we have our team back together today. We got Vicky Ray. Say hello, Vicky.
Hi, everybody.
And John Wilson's come back from his travels around New York City. So he's back with us. Say hello, John.
I'm back, folks. Hello.
And before we get started, let's find out what everyone's been up to. So, John, what have you been up to?
Yesterday, I went to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Very interesting. It's very interesting. I don't want to give anything away. It's very Quentin Tarantino, but it's an homage to the 70s. It does tie in
Manson.
Manson, and it's very interestingly done. I can't. The ending was very amazing.
I was going to say, ending, does it have any fact to it, or is that all artistic license? Because I saw they had Sharon Tate, and then they tried to.
Yeah, it's sort of built around a fictional mechanic of, like, fictional characters meet real people, but the scenarios sometimes are fictionalized, so it's left to the imagination, right? So I kind of was like, wait, I don't know that much about everything, so I kind of want to go back and research some of it even more, because I'm like, they fictionalize some of it so much that it's fiction, but then there's parts of it that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is real to life, like Sharon Tate, and then the relationships there around her, but it's actually was pretty good. I mean, it's a long movie. It's like almost 3 hours.
Right. And
there's times when you're like, oh my God, this is just dragging on. But there's a lot of good, like, comedic beats. There's a lot of good sort of interaction between Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and the characters and how their relationship works. Because Brad Pitt is like a stuntman, and then Leonardo DiCaprio is this actor he's aging out. So he's basically in his late 30s, and back then it was like, oh, I'm old now, so I'm gonna start not getting the roles that I want, right? So it's kind of like what Hollywood was back then, and how he's trying to cling to this, like, how can I still be a famous actor? But he's always played the villain. So he's always played every Western he's been in. He's like the guy in black, right? And he's always like just hard ass, like, but it's a very interesting film. We'll watch it again just because to get some of the referencing, but like, it's Tarantino. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Tarantino. I appreciate him, but I'm not a massive fan of his. I love his camera angling, and all of that is like amazing. So if you appreciate it from that standpoint, if you just kind of watch the scenes, you're like, wow, how is he getting these scenes, and how is he cutting to these scenes? Because it's almost like very meta. Like, at one point when he's acting, he's behind them acting, and so it's really interesting.
Wait, aging out. Meanwhile, you got movie stars like John Wayne, Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, all of which who had complete careers. So I don't really remember old Hollywood being geared to the early people in their early 20s. Maybe toward women, but not toward men.
Well, he was in his 30s. He was in his 30s. So for some reason, that was for him. It was like he feels like he was aging out, like, or he felt like at this point it's almost like, no matter what he can do, he's trying to be the best actor, and he kind of already is. But the pressure of that, it just puts him over the edge sometimes. So he's always smoking, he's always drinking, and like that was very old Hollywood too, like probably even still Hollywood.
But I think you also have to look at during the time period of this film. It's also the Hollywood system is dying.
Yes, correct.
So we got that going on at the same time. So yeah, though Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart and people of that ilk were able to have long time careers, once the studio system started failing around 1969, their careers started dying. You saw less of these people.
And there was an interesting kind of bookend that my friend had pointed out, which was you have Sharon Tate, who is just starting her career, and then you have him, who's been in the career for years, playing like sitcom, movies, westerns, and all that. And how she's just excited and like, wow. And like at one point she like goes to the theater and she sees her name up on the marquee and she's just like, oh my God, I'm up on the marquee, and she's so excited by that. And then you flip over and you see him and he's just kind of like struggling with, oh, okay, I'm in the minutia of it all, but I don't know where I'm going with this. And I know I have to just keep doing this because this is what I do. Right. So it's really interesting.
I mean, I guess, if you like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I guess you can compare it to Inglourious Bastards, where it does have some fact running through it, but it's actually a fictionalized version of World War II.
Oh, you mean that Hitler wasn't murdered in a theater that was later set on fire? That's not what happened.
I love that movie.
I mean, I never knew that David Bowie was recording in 1942 until I saw it.
Yes, I knew.
I didn't know until you just said so.
So, Vicky, what have you been up to?
Not a whole lot. Just doing the summer thing, and I happened to binge watch a whole season of The Boys because you told me about it the other day ago. It's on Amazon. Oh. It's fantastic. I couldn't stop watching. Well, there's
no spoilers. I want to see it. It looks good.
No spoilers, but The Boys is what Marvel movies should be. I'll just put it that way.
It's fantastic. It really is, because if you like DC Comics and you're into all those typical Avenger movies and Justice League and stuff like that, you're probably gonna like this, but it's the total other spectrum.
It's written and directed by Eric Kripke, who did Heroes.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you'll like it, John. I'm pretty sure if you watch it. I couldn't stop watching it. Then I was nursing a cold, but that's what I did. Then Scott started watching it. Let's watch the next episode. Let's not do anything today. Just keep watching. So that's what we did.
Everybody watching it. The only problem is it's only 8 episodes.
I know.
Yeah. But before it even premiered, it got green light for season 2 and season 3 already. So
I hope so, because I don't like how it left off at all. There has to be more.
So, Dave, what have you been up to?
I've been doing the festival route with my screenplay, Awaken the Reaper. And if anybody's really interested, there's an audio production of that. We're going into production with it, or I'm attempting to get it produced. The audio production is the foundation of that. And I helped my friend out on a show called Strange World, which is premiering on August 11th. I helped him with a couple of the episodes in it. You can catch me briefly. And I've been watching a lot of Mad Men because I hadn't seen the series. I've been very curious.
I love that series.
I'm just ending season 3. My girlfriend's my collaborator, and she definitely likes to binge watch series. And I said I've been hearing a lot of great things about Mad Men. And usually, if I'm not captured by a series, a couple of episodes in, I gave up on it. I am now ending season 3, and we're committed to the whole thing because I love it. There's a couple of incredible contrivances that only happen in television or movies. Other than that, it's up there. AMC was the king of the anti-hero because Breaking Bad, Mad Men, both simultaneously on the air, talk about anti-heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And myself, I finished watching Animal Kingdom, which is just a fantastic series. I highly recommend it with Alan Barkin. And yeah, I mean, it kind of blew me away. I'm now in the middle of season 4 because now that's airing in America at the moment. So I'm watching that on my website, which I can't name for.
I know which one it is.
And
I know when you did it too.
Yeah, but it's fantastic. I mean, Animal Kingdom, I highly suggest it. It is one of the best things I've seen. It's based on an Australian film that won a bunch of awards worldwide, and they made a series out of it. They kind of rooted it to America, but it was based on a true story. The film was, but it's very, very good. They probably deal with issues that you would never think of ways to go. I mean, it actually turns one of their gay characters into something quite human for a change. So that was quite nice and evil. So that was quite good. And then, of course, I've been continuing finished watching my reality TV programs with my other half. So we finished, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and what a bunch of bitches they were. And, yeah, I know. But hey, now I got the summer free. So unfortunately, I got spoiled because I did watch The Boys. It's one of those things that was thinking of what to watch, and I started watching The Boys on Amazon Prime and loved it, but it did leave me with a hole because now I'm trying to find a great thing to watch at the moment, and I'm coming up kind of.
Oh, it'll come up. It always does.
Yeah. So, but besides that, that's all I've been up to really. 9 to 5, finishing off. This is for our listeners out there. We're finishing up season 2, so we got about 3 more episodes. And then we'll be going into season 3, which will come with more details on our season finale, which will be later on this month. Before we go into Strangers on the Train, the Patricia Highsmith novel from 1950, we have a special PSA from Eli Roth and Joe Romero. He's an ocean cinematographer about saving the sharks.
Hi, I'm Eli Roth.
And I'm underwater cinematographer Joe Romero.
We're here on behalf of our friends at Shark Allies. There's a very important moment happening right now in Florida legislature, and we need your support.
Florida imports and exports more shark fins than any place in the country.
And there's a bill on the table to ban it completely. Shark finning is illegal in the U.S., but the shark fin trade is not. It's only illegal in 12 states.
Florida will be the 13th state out of all 50 to adopt the no shark fin trade policy.
Even though the shark finning is illegal, the trade is actually driving more illegal activity. If we eliminate the trade, we can eliminate finning.
We lose an estimated 100 million sharks a year. It's 11,000 sharks an hour and 3 sharks a second. No animal can keep up with that. That's mass extinction.
Go here and sign this petition and let your voice be heard. And follow our friends at Shark Allies. Whether you are from Florida or not, we need your help.
Let's ban the shark fin trade completely.
Hello, welcome back. So make sure that you support those sharks. The website and everything will be in our show notes. They do mention it there, and I suggest all you have to do is sign the petition because sharks are becoming an endangered species due to the fin trade. If you did not get enough information from that, I guess the best thing to do is say that at the moment, fins and the sharks are being cut off the fins, and then the sharks are being put back in the water and they're drowning to the point that 98% of all sharks population from the last 5 years is now diminished. So we suggest that everyone sign those.
All for stupid stuff too, vanity project and.
Yeah,
well, vanity soup, like people are making it as a delicate.
Soup. I mean, why? What's the point?
Well, apparently it has magic powers or whatever like that. Probably the same thing that they do with most things. So what I suggest everyone do, and even though this is the Florida legislation, they're looking for as many petitions as possible, and then they're going to widespread this across the United States. And then once they start that, then they will start in other portions of the world. So get your signature in there now. Help do a great cause. It's not costing you any money, and it'll take 2 minutes of your time. So, for no further ado, let's get into Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on the Train, the 1950 novel. So, Vicki, before we get into it, do you want to do a quick synopsis?
Yeah, I'm ready for you this time. Okay, Strangers on a Train is a 1950 novel written by Patricia Highsmith, and it's about 2 men whose lives become entangled after one of them proposes that they trade murders. It then goes ahead. One of them goes ahead and fulfills his end of the imaginary bargain, leading to fatal consequences for both.
Well, but I guess before we get started, I guess we should give a little bit of information about Patricia Highsmith. Patricia Highsmith is one of these best-selling novels of she was born in 1921, but in the 1950s to the 1970s, she was a best-selling novel who won tons and tons of awards. She was mainly known for her existential literature, is what she's mainly known for. And she was probably one of the first authors, and a female author at that, to actually have the anti-hero come to the foreground. She also made sure that the good and evil were very, very closely related, and there wasn't this strong sense that other novelists were doing at this time. She was an alcoholic, unfortunately, to the end of her days. She was a recluse. She was a lesbian. She said that though she did sleep with men, she didn't find them attractive. And she found women, though she did have a hard time keeping relationships. There is a homosexual theme into every single one of her writings that was buried. And if you think of the time that she was publishing, this was quite way ahead of its time, and she was getting away with it. She came out with one of the first lesbian novels to actually come out, called The Price of Salt in 1952. And it was republished 38 years later, called Carroll, which they made a movie out of in 2015. It was up for a bunch of Oscars.
Yeah, it was actually a great movie.
I mean, I guess what most of our listeners would probably know her from is probably The Talented Miss Ripley and the Ripley novels. What's also interesting is at the moment, the Ripley novels are all going into a TV series, and Ripley's coming back to, I believe it's going to be either Amazon Prime or Netflix. I know they're shopping it around at the moment, but it should be out in 2021. So and as far as the novel is concerned, when the novel did come out, it was a huge bestseller. What's interesting is the novel came out in 1950, which we're going to be discussing the novel, and then later we'll be discussing the Alfred Hitchcock 1951. The reason why we are doing a definite division here is because the 1950 novel, there's a lot of differences in it that we're not able to put into the film due to the Hays Code. But we will cover The Strangers on the Train, the novel. So, Dave, anything you want to talk about The Strangers on the Train, the novel?
It certainly is different than the movie. I would say that the movie very much is one of the few examples of something improving upon the book. The novel, I don't think it's quite as strong. I think, I was doing my term paper from college was on Strangers on the Train, and I was comparing and contrasting the movie. And I feel like when Raymond Chandler, Hitchcock came along, they reshaped the story. Wait a minute. I was an architect, and Bruno was younger than Guy. The dynamic was inverted rather than Guy being the junior to Bruno's senior. And I don't think it's a great bit of storytelling, but it certainly, I think it was probably in its time very controversial, very daring, and not quite in line with the Highsmith work to follow. I think that Ripley's Talented Miss Ripley holds up quite a bit better than the novel of Strangers on the Train.
I liked the book but a whole lot more. Well, I liked the movie too, but I liked the book because I liked how it got into Bruno's character, like it got in his head, which you couldn't really see in the movie. That's why I liked it, because he was such a sociopath.
You don't see that in the movie?
Well, no, I mean, I think
in the movie, but she gets you get into his brain more, and he's like a bad penny that shows up in both. But I mean,
I think what I see more in Bruno in the novel is that he is obsession, right? He is obsessed with Guy, and he followed the plan, if he really followed what he believed was the plan, they probably would have gotten away with it. But the fact that he kept showing up and he felt like he had to be in Guy's life, or he needed to see Guy, is kind of what was their downfall in a lot of ways. I think what you got to see, like Vicky was saying, is the internal workings of his obsession, and like basically attacking a woman and making her out to be this like whore, and we, in the film, which we'll get to later, is you see Miriam as a different character. They paint her as a very different character, but in the book, we really know nothing about her other than what Guy says about her, right? We don't even get to see her that much. So what he's building in his brain is like, oh, look at her flirting with these guys. I would never treat Guy like that, and it's sort of the obsession, and you get to see that build, and that's what I think I see more than what you see in the film, which is more cat and mouse, right? I'm going to play around with this, and I want to do something, and I want to ride the rails, right? I want to kind of be manipulative, and I want to manipulate people because I know I can, and it excites me. I'm different.
You notice a parallel? Do you notice a parallel between Talented Mr. Ripley and the novel The Strangers on a Train? Is basically a character, an outsider character who has a crush on the lead character and doing awful things. There's a definite parallel there. But Keith, sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I actually was going to mention that as well. I think what you also have, I think where the novel comes off very strongly is that we do have the crisscross and murders, and Guy does reluctantly, he does commit the murder to finish off the contract, thinking this will be the end of it. And I think, like you said with Ripley, I think what we do have here is we got, one character who's idolizing Guy, Bruno's idolizing Guy, to the simple fact that he's almost trying to implement himself into Guy's life. And as with the Talented Mr. Ripley, that's what we have with Tom Ripley's character. He's implementing his life into this other person's life to the point where he's almost taking over this person's life.
Yeah.
I think that Patricia Highsmith does cut back from Bruno actually taking over Guy's life. But then what I quite like, I think Guy is a stronger character here. I think there's a lot of nuances with Guy because and I also like what we have here is even though Bruno starts the contract off by killing Guy's wife, but what you see is we also find out that Bruno has a bit of a conscience here as well, because what happened is that he becomes more and more an alcoholic, and his life is more and more deteriorating, though he thinks he's trying to keep it together because he's now showing up. When he does show up a Guy, he's more disheveled. He's more drunk all the time. But at the same time, we got Guy after he commits his murder, the guilt that happens to him and the way that it creates in the relationship with his fiance, who happens to, they do get married to his wife. And I quite like, you see the downfall of Guy at the same time. And you see the way Guy's exterior slowly starts to crumble as well underneath the weight of these two murders. So even though, the film is a kind of a different way to handle this, I think it's quite interesting that Highsmith was able to take two characters who commit a murder, and you watch the deterioration of both characters in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that was quite interesting. And I thought that using those devices, and to the simple fact that even when Guy has a chance to get rid of Bruno out of his life, or Bruno falls over the ship, and they could have just gone off and let him drown, but Guy jumps in and Guy saves him. And the thing is that Guy kind of does like Bruno. There's something about Bruno that Guy does like.
Correct. Yes.
There's a connection for sure, but
I think what it is, what he likes about him is Guy was never really challenged to be other than what he is, like a socialite, versus Bruno kind of let him reach into the taboo, right? He let him kind of dip his toe in and made him think about something he would never want to think about, which is killing someone, right? But putting that in his mind, I think there's a couple lines where Guy is kind of rationalizing, like, I don't want to do this, but I'm almost curious to do it because I want to know how it makes me feel, right? And it's like he awakens something within Guy that once he does it, he's like, well, I didn't really like that. And now he has to live with the consequences of doing what he did. Because it's interesting because the author, being lesbian, like it almost is challenging people to look at themselves and owning who they are. If you really are who you are and you make the choices of who you are, and even if it challenges the norms, right? And you're confident with what you are, like, as long as it's not hurting someone else, and this was clearly hurting someone else, and it was clearly just out of control. So I think it's having control over, trying to break from the norms of life, right? That's the way I saw it. In a way, it was like he was fine. He was trying to get divorced from this other woman to get married because he was, again, trying to follow the beat that everyone else is doing. I just want to be in a stable marriage. I wasn't in a stable marriage with this woman who got pregnant by someone else, right? And so he wanted to keep following the norms, whereas Bruno was, we know from other people saying things about him, was always riding the rails, always doing reckless things, saying, reckless things to people. And it was always like, so there has to be some enamoring to that, right? Like I would be enamored by someone who just is so carefree,
I think it also paints the class struggle as well, because Guy's a social climber.
Yeah,
correct. He's from a small town. He's a social climber who he's made good. He's in his position because of working, and his relationship with Anne actually lifts him out of his class struggle, really. That kind of brings up to another level, and being an architect does that as well, because it does give him the money to rise as new money, not old money. Bruno's old money. And I think what we have here is we also have the class struggle that with Bruno being old money, he can get away with these sort of things, where new money can really get away with these sort of things. And he can anger, if you notice that all Bruno's friends are lifelong friends, or friends of the family, everyone's so interconnected and so incestuous. And that's what you do get with old money, is everything's very incestuous.
And you also look away. I mean, his mother, for example, was just constantly the type of woman who would be like, oh, it's okay. I mean, that's just him being him, even though, like, it'd be like the kind of mother that you're like, oh, ma'am, the maid coming up, ma'am, your son strangled the cat. Oh, he was just playing with it. Just go bury it in the backyard, right? So they kind of ignore. We don't want to know, but okay, well, that was odd. Let's move on.
Well, I was wondering what do you think was in the author's mind, though, because did you notice that there was just no humanity at all towards Miriam? I mean, just nobody gives a shit about this woman, even in the very end.
Well, you got to remember it's 1950s as well. I mean, we're talking about a woman who's married to a faithful man. She's pregnant. They're not divorced. They're separated. She becomes pregnant with another married man's child.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
True.
She's ginger. That's a strike. And, but
I thought guys liked redheads back then. I didn't think that being
but I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, the only thing missing from Miriam, from the descriptions that we have and the way that she's leading her life, is basically a great big scarlet letter on her, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
And you got to remember, she's not living in a city. She's living in a small town in Texas, a very small town in Texas.
Well, and let's even talk about that, because I feel like that's a huge thing in the novel, that she's very small county, small town, like that. Her classification. You talk about, Guy wanting to socially climb. That wasn't efficient for him, right? Because he's trying to be, in a way, an artist, right? He's trying to be an artist and do his art, but he also wants to be an elite. He doesn't want to be small town guy. Like, he wants to be big town, big city guy,
Yeah.
I think we also get the whole thing with, high school sweethearts that marry, isn't it? And I think that's kind of the thread. I think what also I think is quite interesting is that when the book starts out, you assume that Bruno's father is the one who has the money, but you later find out the money actually comes from the mother's side of the family. Yeah, which was quite interesting, I thought. Which I think another thing that's quite strange about this for a female author, and we've covered some female authors in the past, and I read quite a few female authors when I do my critiques of books, when I send those out. And I found the women quite strange for a female author. There's not a lot of depth to the women. There is a still well going on with these women. Yeah. But they actually are kind of stuck in their 1950s sensibilities. You got the mother, Bruno's mother sort of thing. And even though the money lies within the mother side of the family, and, she is having fun. And I guess we're under the assumption that she's actually having affairs, or she flirts a lot.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
But then here we go. Here's another thing with the class struggle. You got Bruno's mother, who's acting the same way as Guy's ex-wife.
Yeah. And
she gets away with it because she can, because that's old money. This is, part of the class struggle that we have here, which is quite interesting. But then we got the character of Anne. And, Anne on surface, when you start reading the book, she's just kind of just surface. But then as the novel comes out, you actually believe there's a great big deep well underneath Anne, and it's something totally different. And normally what we get with female writers is that there's not a lot of deep female characters normally in a female author's books. What you get basically is whatever's going on with the woman is there on the page. It's just what it is. And they say everything they want to say. They don't hold back. I'm woman, hear me roar. Helen Reddy's around the corner. And this is what we but Patricia Highsmith pulls back on her women characters, which is quite bizarre, really, if you think of the time period and everything like that. Even though these women are set in their 1945 to 1950 sensibilities, there's a lot more going on here that the reader has to fill in.
Yeah.
Quite extraordinary, really, I think.
Well, especially again, not trying to go and bleed into the movie with Anne's character. In the book, she's very trusting. She sees things and she never really wants to challenge it. All she really wants to do is be by Guy's side. Like, she just wants to be there for him and help him. And how can I help you? And being dutiful, right? And I think in some ways, out of all the characters in the novel, she was the flattest character for me, because she didn't really challenge him up until like the end. Then when she started to kind of, it was almost like too blatantly in her face that she had to now like confront that and say, okay, I now need to see what's going on. But it is, I do find it interesting, like you said, like the female characters, they're so much below the surface that you want to know. And I feel with the male characters, they really she brings out all these layers to them and just who they are and what they're thinking.
Do you guys think that it's like, because it's that era in time? I mean, Dave, you can jump in here anytime you want, but do you think that that's why, I don't know, do you think it's because she's a female and she seems like, well, I mean, like with the Miriam character, I mean, Bruno takes immediate dislike to her. He doesn't even know her. But like Keith said, his mom is probably doing the same kind of, hanky-panky kind of stuff going on, like she does. Do you think that he was projecting onto her? Because he latched on to wanting to kill this woman right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Guy didn't deserve this. She's a horrible, wretched slut,
Well, I also think because she hurt Guy, right? And Guy expresses hurt. So I think, again, if he's have feelings for Guy, it's wanting to make her pay for hurting him, right? But there definitely could, to me, be a connection, which I didn't think about, with how he sees his mother. And he's never going to challenge his mother to not be this socialite who wants to kind of sleep with all of the rich men, right? He's never going to challenge that. But this is his instance where he can actually act out his frustration on someone who is acting like that. And I'm going to punish her the way I want to punish my mom, right? For doing what she's doing.
Perhaps.
So it could be. Yeah, could be.
But then again, killing off Miriam is killing off a commoner anyway. To him, it doesn't mean anything. She does, she's just a no
white
person.
Trash.
Well,
we all got white trash down here in Texas.
But I also
and it's funny because he follows her around, and it's more like a prey, right? He's never wanting to get too close to her because he doesn't want to get to know her really. And then it's basically like, "Are you Miriam?" Yep. And he's like, and he just chokes her out and kills her. And it's kind of like, okay, well that was kind of easy. Oh, okay, I didn't know. He, like he said there was no like. And I think in the novel, doesn't he say something in his head like, well, it's kind of like when I he killed something else, and he treated it like, well, it's kind of like killing a rabbit.
Yeah.
Oh, no biggie. No big deal.
He's soulless, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't feel.
Well, I don't know, because he feels towards Guy.
But for him, yeah. But I mean, that's where the underlying, I don't know, dare I say, like the homosexual tone going through, did he have a crush on this guy,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, 100% to me. I don't think that's where I think it's different from a psychopathic sort of standpoint. There's no connectivity to anyone. You pretend, right? You pretend to have feelings and care for people because you kind of mimic the behaviors of other people. But deep down, if I was like, you know what, Vicky's getting in the way, I'm going to make her pretend that I like her, then I'm just going to kill her. And then it's like, well, now Keith's got on my nerve. Okay, well, I'm going to go. And it's sort of a psychopath doesn't have any, oh, you know what, I have a friendship with them, or I have like camaraderie, so I don't think I can do this. I think for him, I think he wanted to be able to pull off killing someone that had no connection to him, because he could have killed his own father, but I just don't think he wanted to. He was like, yeah, I don't feel like it. I want, someone else to do it, but then I have a connection to him. So I'm also realizing I'm not psychopathic. Like, I don't think I can do that to him.
I have a question for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So in this age of DNA evidence, is a crisscross murder even viable anymore? Because if you take, there's no motive, but now you got DNA on the crime scene.
Right.
So the third thing that the conceit of this story, after the invention of DNA, which I don't believe the DNA evidence existed when this novel was written.
I don't believe so either.
You can't. This story is irrelevant now.
Well, it's not even the DNA though, because if it is a crisscross murder, it's like, let's say Keith and I plot someone's death, right? And we crisscross. It's how we interact, and we got to make sure that connection is never clear. Yeah. And in this day and age, it is very difficult because we would have to meet somewhere where no one would see us. There's cameras everywhere. We'd have to make sure no one would ever know who we are. We'd make sure that once we separate, that there's no connection. We can't email each other. We can't call each other. So could you get away with a murder? Yes. And the detective would probably be like, I don't know why this person killed this person. We never will know why. Because you'll get caught eventually with DNA, but they might
get away with it anymore.
No, I mean, not get away with it, but like in a way saying that I could kill someone for Keith, and they're never going to understand that Keith is the one who wanted it, right? Like you're going to say like, well, he killed this person. We have the forensics to prove that he killed this person, but we don't know why.
The reason why serial killers tend to be able to operate very successfully anyway is because their DNA is not put into any database. That helps. Another thing is they don't kill anyone they know. And if there's no connection to the person that you're killing, you can probably get away with the murder. The problem is that if they can they can find a connection or the motive and put that together, and then they have a reason to ask for your DNA, and then they could trace your DNA to a crime scene. But the thing is that first of all, they have to make that connection. How does this person know this person that they murdered? That's why
you have to have motive, right? Premeditative is better than not premeditative. So they would have to say, well, why does Keith hate this person? Why does this person hate someone to kill them? Basically,
I mean, if you wanted to murder someone and get away with it successfully, make sure that you have no connection with that person whatsoever.
Yeah.
And you have a higher rate of getting away with it because there's not going to be anything there to connect you.
See, this is an educational podcast.
I think that if you wanted to, if you want to do a crisscross kind of thing, there are certain things that you would have to do. I mean, if something happens and you met up, sort of thing, and an open place or something like that, let's say that you're at a cafe, you're having coffee, sort of thing, and then someone sits down in front of you, and for some reason you're able to have this kind of conversation, do a crisscross. Yeah, you could effectively get away with it. The problem basically is that if something happens, you start emailing each other, Facebook sharing, or becoming an Instagram friend or a Twitter friend, something like this. Now all of a sudden you got a little bit. If there's any communication going on between you, doing a one-off person meeting someone one-off in an open place, it's not going to set off alarm bells. It's when you see that person more than once, and there's all of a sudden what you have as a system or a chronicle of events to start connecting everything. And
if you look at the
problem lies.
I was going to say, if you look at like assassinations, it's usually here's who you need to kill and here's the information, and that's it. I'm not talking to you. This is just what you need in order to kill this person, right? And that's where a lot of people who do assassinations, they kind of get away with it. There's no connectivity, there's no way of finding out. I mean, we went down a really dark road. Sorry, everybody. We're literally and here's how you plot a murder.
I think another thing you need to remember is that when the police go into a crime scene anyway, they work backwards. And the first thing they do is who will benefit from this? Correct. Why was this person murdered? And
motive.
And what are these benefits? Money tends to be a biggest benefit, or jealousy. It's money and jealousy. Yeah. The problem is that when there's no money or jealousy or anyone to benefit from that, liberty and freedom is another cause of someone being murdered. That you might murder someone because that'll free you from a situation.
Right.
Now, if something happens and that person gets murdered,
or revenge too, obviously, right? So if a person gets harmed, like there's a revenge kill, right? So
but that normally goes down as manslaughter if it's a revenge sort of thing. So that works. Yeah. So if you're talking about first degree murder, it's those three things. You cut out those three things, then it's really hard to trace back because the first thing the police are going to do is family and friends. That's the first thing they start communicating. If there's a huge amount of money and the money is going to go somewhere, it's that. We do get this kind of in this novel as well. Basically, when we get the detective coming through for a thing, who's going to benefit from Marion's murder? Guy's going to benefit. So then all of a sudden, that guy's kind of a thingy, but he's out of town. So there's nothing to connect him with Bruno. Then basically, this is where the story becomes quite interesting, but the crisscross doesn't work because of what Bruno's activities. Yeah. Because what happens is when Guy takes Bruno's father's life, yes, there's nothing to connect him. I mean, as far as the person who saw Guy, the person's description's off. He's, the guy's too tall. The description of Guy is totally alternative to what he really is. And what basically turns the detective on there is that, well, who's going to benefit? Bruno's going to benefit this.
Yeah.
Now the question is why is all of a sudden, about 2 years ago, does Bruno start hanging around Guy for? And that's what connects the dots here. Now, if Bruno stayed away and didn't have any connection or something like this, chances are it probably would have been a successful crisscross.
Yeah.
Because of Bruno's infatuation and wanting to put himself into Guy's life. And I also think that what we do have here as well is with Bruno's demise, I think that once Bruno's father was murdered by Guy, all of a sudden, and this is what I think the novel is quite interesting, then we don't see the downfall of Bruno or Bruno's character being deteriorated until the death of Bruno's father. Now, the reason why we do get this is because Bruno's mother starts deteriorating. She's not as young as she used to look. She's looking tired. She's starting to look haggard. She's not doing her hair. She's no longer the woman that she was. So obviously she must have loved her husband. Yeah. And that's what causes the demise of Bruno, which causes basically, Bruno's laziness, Bruno's messiness. The alcoholism makes him more messy by the end of it. And that's what helps the detective put the dots together.
Talk about
I also think that it's also Guy thinking I fulfill the contract, right? So we and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. I'm done, right? I'm done, and he even threatens him, like, I'll tell that actually did him in as well, because he threatens
to tell
Guy with, I'm going to tell everyone, and like his, and get to know, the detective get to know, like all these people are getting notes. So that has to signify something. And you're like, now, okay, we were kind of thinking it's you. And then we were like, not, now we are thinking it's you. Right. And so, I think his downfall also was just Guy finally saying, I don't need to talk to you anymore. Right. Like, I'm just going to reject you. And the more he kept coming and rejecting him, the more angry he got and the more deteriorated he just started to lose his mind,
I also think it's quite interesting that the novel paints as well is the 7 degrees of separation that we have here as well.
Yeah.
Because once the detective is able to figure out what the motive was, as soon as he could figure out who's going to benefit and put the relationships together, then I thought this was quite interesting that she did this in quite a subliminal type of way and kind of underlaid it, but it's all in there about, the cab driver that met Bruno to take him such and such, the steward on the train. Then it's like once you have that connection, then you can sit there and start going back in time, and you can make all these connections to actually build your case.
Yeah, well, and they also lied too, so that was a big thing that made the difference too, is them lying about when they met. Right? Like, when did they actually meet? And then the detective kind of going, wait, didn't you say you met here? But they're saying you actually met here. Well, yeah, we actually did meet. So, like, you lying about when you met someone, that's a big red flag too. Like, why would you lie about when you met someone?
That's how Anne puts it together as well.
Yeah.
Is because the stories don't match. And if you're going to put this in realism terms as well, is another thing what the police will do. Police will ask you a series of questions, and then they'll ask you the same questions over and over again, but they'll reword the question. And basically what happens is, and what they'll also do is they'll pause. They'll leave just silence there. And because people can't deal with the silence, they start taking facts and they start, elaborating on things. And it's the elaboration that gets people caught time and time again. Because what happens is you give a little bit of information. It's like, John and I met on Xbox. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, okay, well, so you and John met on Xbox. How did that go? Well, John and I met on Xbox, so we did this. And then we did this. And then it's like, and then they go to John and John says this, but then John will add a couple more details onto the fact because he doesn't know exactly what details I given. And basically the two people start adding details on. And then they go, well, no, he didn't say that. Then you start going, oh, well, maybe it was blah, sort of thing. And then they'll ask the other person, and then they'll maybe it was blah, and it's not going to match. And that's and this is what gets people caught time and time again.
Or it's like it's a timestamp thing, right? So let's say we met online and we're each other's alibi. If I'm saying that we were online at 12 and you're saying you're online at 1, there's an hour difference there of time. And then they can actually go back in. Nowadays, you can go back in and look at person's logins and see when they actually log in. And let's say it wasn't even that time. Let's say it was actually 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and now there's like a 3 or 4 hour gap. Like, well, what happened where you knew you were saying definitively it was midnight? I know it was midnight because I looked at my phone, right? I looked at my clock, right? So you definitively say that's the time. Well, you better be able to back up when they actually have proof that it isn't, and why you said it was 12 on your phone. Did you have your wrong time on your phone? Can you show me your phone? Can you So you have to kind of back up what you say.
Can't get out of that stuff anymore, but just because of the electronics these days. Yeah. I was kind of surprised in the novel how that what was his name, the detective. He was like always showing up too. I mean, he was like stuck on him like white on rice, and he was just smart. I mean, they didn't have all that. The technology we have now to rely on, so you had to have your wits about you when you're investigating.
Well, it's also like when you know something doesn't smell right, you know it, right? As a detective, you know your gut, and you're like, something's not right about the situation, and you know when someone is withholding truth, right? And so you want the truth, and at any cost, you kind of keep poking, keep prodding, ask the mother, ask other people, ask Anne, and the more they ask people, it puts tension on the person that you're accusing, right? Because they know you don't like, I don't want you to go to Vicky because Vicky might know something, and I don't want you to keep poking at her because she might say something that she shouldn't say. And now, oh, great, now I'm even more incriminated. Well, John was acting a little weird the other day. What do you mean by that? Like, and it's like then, it just is like a snowball effect because now they're using someone that cares about you as a tool to get you to confess.
Right.
Right. You might be a very sullen person to be like, you know what? I can hold my ground. I can trick them. Right. I'm not going to tell the truth. But the moment they say like, John, we were talking to your mother the other day, and you're like,
yeah.
And you're like, what? Why? And it's like all of a sudden, like they might lie, obviously. Right. They might be like, she felt something was off with you. And you said this to her, and that just makes you break down a little bit. It breaks, it cracks you, and you're like, oh crap, and you end up saying something you shouldn't, and then that's how you get someone to confess. So,
I think also what you also have to consider is like you and I can have our stories, and we can get our stories straight, and we can match our stories. But the problem is you also have to remember that no man's an island, so you have everyone around you. And how are they going to substantiate your story? I mean, it's a bit like when Bruno shows up at Guy's wedding. And it's like, how do you know Guy? Well, no, I don't remember. It's like, oh, we met. I can't exactly remember what exactly Guy said. Guy says that we met at such and such place. And one of the best men goes, no. I mean, I knew you then. I never remember seeing Bruno here or anything like that. And so then you also have this going on, which is, that you got to make sure the people around you can match your stories as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not able to do that, then you pretty much dug yourself a grave. And that's probably why a crisscross murder would be quite difficult. I mean, even back then, but I mean, today, of course, as you know,
almost impossible now.
Well, I think you could do it, but you're going to have to be very, very smart about it. And if I do a crisscross murder and I do it, let's say I'm on the tube with somebody and I'm sitting next to someone on the tube or on the train sort of thing, and we do it to a certain fact that no one overhears us, and then we never talk about it ever again, and we just do it.
Right.
We probably can get away with it, but I think what Patricia Highsmith does in this novel is show that it only works if the person does become infatuated with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you also have, but I also think what Patricia Highsmith does really well is that when you do take someone's life, these are two normal people, really, for all sakes. Okay, maybe Bruno's a bit of a psychopath to a certain degree, but, Bruno's not going around killing multiple people. He killed one person.
Yeah.
The guy kills one person, and basically what the toll that does on you. Now, if they were serial killers, there might have been a bit of things might have played out differently. If Bruno loved to kill and Guy loved to kill, then he wouldn't have this guilt complex that's happening within their lives.
Yeah.
Their life deteriorates. And even though at the time of this novel, and when we go into the film, there's a reason why a lot of the stuff's not in the film, which we'll cover when we get into the film, is, they both, even though people assume that within the novel that they kind of do get away with it, but they don't get away with it.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
There is a price to be paid. The price isn't, bad man die, bad man goes to jail, what you tend to get in a lot of films or anything like this, but it gets something a lot more deeper, the price is.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts about how Anne's treatment of Bruno is? How she's always he spends the night at their house and that kind of thing.
Again, I think it's like a dutiful thing. She sees there's this bond between Bruno and Guy, and I think for her, she's just trying to be the good future wife of him, and it's like, I think, again, I think her character is very monotone in the book. So I think it was like, is it her way of just being dutiful, or it could also be the more they interact, the more she gets the pressure going, right? The more she gets the pressure of making Guy trip to get more truth from him, because she wants the truth, but I think Guy is trying to protect her. I don't want you to know, and so he's trying to protect her. And
is he trying to protect her, or is it the simple fact that he's trying to protect
himself?
For her not looking at him and
correct. I don't think he wants to diminish how she sees him, right? And I think he also reminisces about the relationship he had with Miriam, and like how, in a way, it's like something changed about her with him, and he doesn't want that to happen with Anne, and so he's very cautious with her. Like, I don't want her to feel indifferent to me, right?
I found what's quite interesting in this novel for the 1950s is that Anne and Guy have sexual relations before marriage. I thought that was quite interesting in the time setting and stuff like this. I also quite like, and I quite like that. This is Patricia Highsmith's first novel, and of course, at the same time, we did cover a book that was written around the same time called *The Bad Seed*. If you remember that,
right? If
you remember how the characters in that are, and then you compare it to the characters here. And I think that Patricia Highsmith and then Shirley Jackson's another one. You can tell the differences about these female authors that are coming out at this time. Yeah. And I think that how they take more risks. There's a lot more risk taking with these characters. There's risk taking going on with the circumstances. There's risk taking in the sexuality part of it, if you want to put in there. But it's all done very, very intelligently.
Yeah, I agree.
The Haunting of Hill House is, a couple years later, with, I want to say Claire Bloom, but I can't remember the character's name, who's a lesbian in it.
Oh, you mean Theo?
So you got Theo's character as a
Theodora.
Mm-hmm. And the way that's portrayed in the novel, and you got to remember the sexuality in this is portrayed the same kind of way, which is very, very clever. So I think that it's one of these things that it's there, it's blatant, but yet it's not.
Yeah.
Right. Which is quite interesting. I think it's an interesting way that these women writers from the 50s were really being able to take things and take what, writing at this time, as you got to remember, was a huge man industry. There's very few female, and same thing kind of today. I mean, females tend to write like female books, books for females sort of things, which tend to be like, they might be a murder thriller, but it's always like, some mother who's fighting to get her kids back, or
it's more of a drama thriller than an actual like most
existential, I guess.
Most and less fiction, like they're more like male like fiction and nonfiction, whereas this, I think her being a fictional female writer is very like, again, you're gonna maybe write a book as a woman to talk about life, like nonfiction. You're going to write something that's going to kind of connect with other women. This is more of a fictitious story that, as a female writer, I could see you really are getting to kind of express your own taboos in a way, and like being able to kind of express the what ifs. And I think it's interesting that she chose male leads in the story, because I think in my mind, like, what if it was two women plotting murder, and how that would change the whole context of it, right? Because they're now going to be viewed throughout the story in a different way than what men would. That's another thing, is the oversight that two men can get away with murder, and sort of, yes, there's a detective in kind of trying to pursue what the truth is, but imagine if it was two women who did this.
It has a product of its time, correct? And I believe because women were not as able to do as much as a man could circa 1950, that the writer, as a female, probably felt limited in the things that they could do.
Yeah.
So it's just a product of its time. Just ironically, the author happened to be female, but that could be a more interesting story on the page than two male protagonists, because it would have been a really fresh take. Thelma and Louise of the time period.
Correct. Yeah. And I think it's also, typically women didn't travel alone to, like that type of thing. You had to travel with someone. So to get away with something would even be more difficult, right? You have to, now you not only have to have like a way of setting up a plan, but you also have to get around, which we will get into in the film. They kind of get around the trickery of it by trying to use an accomplice to help you get around certain things, right? So that would be a very interesting take, that like no one's really watching them. And I think you think in the book and in the film, they're able to kind of get away with it, because who's going to look at a guy doing this, right? But if a woman was out late at night walking by herself to an estate, ma'am, what are you doing? Where's your husband?
Right,
why are you out here doing this, right? So it's more closely looked at.
Has anyone here ever read any of Patricia Highsmith's other books?
No.
No, I can't say
I pretty much read her whole catalog. I'm a huge fan of hers. And it's funny, though, that all her books are male-oriented in a weird
Interesting. So there isn't ever a female protagonist that's sort of like the anti-hero,
Maybe it was bold time period. Maybe there was a degree of, for lack of a better word, sexism in terms of the average reader. I don't think that was the reason, because if you read Talented Mr. Ripley or any of the Ripley books, if you also read, Strangers on the Train, even with Carroll's probably the one that probably has a female character who's a lesbian but her men characters are always, the women characters are always very, very strong, and they're deep, and they have this inner strength about them, but they don't put their cards on the table. They're not boasting or anything like this, and they're the ones that put everything together in every single scenario. Well, here's the possibility.
And they tend to be in the shadows, where the men are all flawed. Every single man in our area is flawed. They tend to get away with things, but they tend to get away with the things not because of their intelligence or because they're very smart, but due to plain luck half of the time.
Yeah.
Well, the females in Strangers on a Train don't seem particularly deep. But I think it has a lot to do with Patricia Highsmith. The novels that she was attracted to and probably reading had male protagonists, and she in this particular genre. So she was doing her take on a successful genre without ever really breaking out of the conventions of it too much. She's like, she was probably raised on noir novels and always had the male protagonist. So she just stayed she drew within the lines of what the genre allowed for at that time.
Yeah. Well, it was quite interesting. In the late 1950s, she did an interview where she says she occasionally engaged in sex with men without physical desire for them, but the male face doesn't attract me. It isn't beautiful to me. She said she tried to like men. I like most men better than I like women, but not in bed.
Wow.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, so maybe that's why. Maybe she I mean, maybe she's one of those women who just adores men, but
I also think
I'll have sex in a relationship with women, but as far as like the people I want to surround myself with, I'd rather surround myself with men. And I know a lot of women who are like that, rather surround themselves with men. And I know a lot of men who rather surround themselves with women than with other men. So I mean,
I also think it's interesting because maybe she saw these taboos in men that weren't being able to be expressed, right? And their desires for things, their desire for other, right? And so it was her way of maybe an homage to some of these men who, just like women had to live up to a certain standards in the 50s, men had to be the man, right? Had to, do this for their family, protect and be masculine and overtly, so it's interesting that her stories kind of allow these men to be other, to be explore those other sides of themselves that they're just not able to do in the light of day. So I think, especially like Talented Mr. Ripley, I think it's such an interesting story where there's a connection that you see even in this novel where Guy is infatuated. He starts to be infatuated with Bruno. Like there's something that is about him that just he's curious. He wants to know more. And even though he's treading a very fine line, he can't help himself. And he's drawn into something.
I mean, I think here's something quite interesting about her as well. Maybe this is the reason why the book's tone is the way it is. When she was asked in 1972 to describe herself, she described herself as a lesbian with a misogynistic streak.
That's funny.
And she said she loved cats, but she hates people. She cannot stand people. When she went to a suave London cocktail party just before her death, she showed up with a gigantic handbag that contained a head of lettuce and 100 snails. When asked what they were doing, they said, "These are the companions because there's no way I'm going to talk to you guys."
Oh shit! Oh my god, that's amazing.
Which is I guess it's quite interesting. Maybe this gives us more of an inward way of like Strangers on the Train and some of her other work. So
yeah.
I mean, the thing is I think overall, I mean, I quite like the novels of the 50s and the 40s and 50s a lot. Sometimes a lot better than modern day writers and stuff like this. And I do think it's because with this kind of book, with like Strangers on the Train and other books that we have covered so far in the podcast, is that there seems to be so many layers and levels. None of it's face value. None of it's at surface. It's all what's going behind everything. And that's what I think that's what I quite like about Strangers on the Train. It's like you think you know it, but then as you go into it and you start diving into it and you start reading it, there's so much starts to unravel, and it works on so many different levels. And I quite like that even the small, minute characters in this book are very memorable. Anne's father is hardly ever in this book, and then basically you have a picture of who this is. The cab driver that drives Bruno to the fairgrounds, or the person on the train that Guy meets before he goes out to kill Bruno's father.
Yeah,
they're strong personalities and strong characters, and I think this is where I think by Highsmith is probably considered one of the greatest American novelists. What I do find odd is that she's an American novelist, but she seems to be working in an English idiom.
I agree. Yeah, totally agree.
Because it does have that English kind of feel with the way she writes and stuff like this.
I think it's interesting, too, towards the end of the novel when Guy goes to confess to Miriam's. Wasn't sure if it was, I would say, an F buddy or a suitor. He kind of was like, yeah, I wasn't really that serious about her anyways. And, when she lost the baby, I was kind of like, whatever. And I'm like, oh my God. And like all you kind of hear is Guy's internal, like, I want to kill this guy. I came here. I was wretched with guilt. And I was feeling like I can come here and tell this guy, I can bare my soul to him. And he's just kind of like,
doesn't give a shit one way or the other.
And I also like that what in his mind, his immediate thought is, what if he is a Bruno? Now, what if he makes me try to kill someone? Now that I've told him, what if he makes me do what Bruno made me do?
Well, did you like the end of the book, though? Did you feel like there was any closure at that? He's gone through all this. He goes through hell. He's had all this tremendous guilt and pressure and everything. And then the end, just take me away. You know,
It was a little lackluster for me because I think here, he wanted to confess a soul to someone that would maybe like say you need to go to prison, and they're not. They're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I get it. And he's kind of like, well, and then it kind of ends with this weird sort of like, almost like Guy being so impressed by Bruno. Like he makes a comment, and I can't remember what the last line is because they use it in the film as well. Like he was an interesting guy, interesting fellow. I mean, well, that's how you're like, what? Like it is sort of a very ambiguous, like, well, what was the point of all this? Because you would think you want someone to pay, right? You want someone to pay for what has happened. And, Bruno obviously paid, but Guy kind of got away with it and is going to go and get married to Anne and have his life. He's not going to be affected by it.
In terms of, it does end with him turning himself over to the detective. We're not quite.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
We're not quite sure what the detective will do. But, I kind of looked at it to the simple fact that Guy is always trying to do what's right. And he's going to do what's right. And he basically, him turning himself over is what's the right thing to do. I think that how, I saw the ending of the book in a way like this. I think it was Guy realized through his unfaithfulness, to his, the reasoning to Bruno. I think he also saw in Bruno what he could be. He could become Bruno. He could become that if he doesn't pay get the retribution that he needs to actually get over this. Because I think that he realized, because we do get subtle things going on in the last few chapters where Guy does start drinking a little bit more than normal. He's trying to he's so concentrated on living this artificial life that maybe if the murder of Miriam didn't happen and he did get his divorce and stuff like this, that he probably would have felt comfortable in this new life that he's building with Anne. But he felt like an imposter in this whole thing, in this whole life sort of thing. And I think that he admired Bruno because through Bruno's faults, at least Bruno was honest to who he was, where Guy was never honest who he was.
True.
And I think that with the ending is that once he goes off to the detective, what you got now is Guy can now accept him to pay society back for what he did, even though he was coerced into it. He might get a lighter sentence and stuff like this. We don't know because the guilt. But I think that he can finally face up that this is who I am, and with the faults and everything, he's no longer going to be the false guy. He's going to become a real guy. I
don't know. I feel like a part of me. There's the thing that I didn't care for in the novel was that he was coerced to kill the father because it wasn't believable to me. Like, in the film, which we'll get into, it was kind of really, really well done and how they approached that whole his internaling and like thinking about how he was going to manage his situation. This was almost like he just caved into it, and it was so clumsily done that he almost did get caught for killing someone. And I think it just didn't set well with like, would someone just do this because you're forced to do this? Like, it's one thing if like Bruno had Anne hostage, like literally was like, I have a gun to her head. If you don't kill him, I'm going to kill her. Right.
Well, Bruno did, but in a way, Bruno did have a gun to Anne's head. And I think this is where I'm going to slightly disagree with you here, because the thing is, if Guy was the kind of person who faced up to his responsibilities and faced up to everything and stopped worrying about what everyone thought and stuff like this, he would have got divorced from Miriam. He would have been able to handle this thing. But he's wishy-washy all the way through. Oh, Miriam. I was like, I want to be with Anne, but there's Miriam there, blah-de-da-de-da. And then, and when asked why don't you just get a divorce? Well, I don't want to da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And if he took control of the situation after Bruno killed, all he had to do is be honest. I mean, all the facts were there. Bruno, there was to take him there.
Well, that's
another part of the country. He didn't agree to it.
Well, that's my thing. Is again, there's holes in the novel version because like he could have very easily in the beginning went and just because he even also when he is told,
but Guy's weak.
But no, but I'm saying when Guy finds out, Guy doesn't in his mind put two and two together like, oh crap, it's this guy Bruno. He kind of was like, oh. What? And like he's kind of in shock, but then he's like, no, it can't be this, right? And then it's only when Bruno kind of confirms, like, hey, I took care of this for you. it's all kind of like, to me, he is wishy-washy, but I'm just saying, like, that doesn't help the motivation as to why he kills his father. Like, it just doesn't.
Yeah, but the reason why he did it, because he was hoping that if he killed Bruno's father, that it would all go away. Because Guy is always looking for the easy solution. He's not looking, if he was a strong person and made strong conclusions and made strong decisions, first of all, he wouldn't have been in a situation with Miriam. He would have come clean when they first found out, because there's nothing connecting him to this murder that him even agree. It was a he said situation. So, I mean, how are you going to prove that, this guy went and killed him because I told him to? There's no way to prove that conversation happened. The same way there's nothing to connect these two people until Bruno enters his life. He kills Bruno's father because and this is another person. Guy's not the brightest bulb in the pack here. Because
I said he's slow on the take. Like, his brain just doesn't fire right.
And, the thing is, he goes, oh, okay, I'll murder Bruno's father, and therefore I'll never see Bruno again. It's like,
really?
And of course that justifies everything. Where Bruno goes, no, I'm not killing your father. I'm going to the police. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell Anne what's going on. And they're all with me when this all happened, and we can sort this all out. The book probably would have been a short story about 5 pages.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I think it works out, because for me, I think that's why Guy is attracted to Bruno in a way, and in reverse, because Bruno makes decisions. Bruno stands up for who he is. Bruno, he's the kind of person that makes decisions, even through the architecture of Guy's work. And even though Guy does build a hotel, and he does get a bit of recognition for it, and he goes on to work on the hotel and stuff like this, he's still iffy about whether it's good enough. Whether am I doing a good enough job? And he's like this all the way through. If it wasn't for Anne, who's basically props him up all the way through everything, I think, if Anne wasn't there, he probably would have fallen apart a lot sooner.
Yeah. I mean, it's consistent with this character. For me, it was like, I think I probably thought more. When I read the book first and then watched a movie, and then you see the contextual difference of the characters, I was like, okay, I resonate more with the film version of the characters than I do the novel, because yes, is he kind of hemming and hawing over everything in the novel? Yeah, I didn't really think that was, like, to me, a justification for a lot of his actions, even after, like, he was also contradictory to himself, because he would say he hated Bruno and I want to just, like, murder him, and then there's times, and then he would be like, I just feel sorry for him and I kind of care for him, and you're like, what? Like, it just is such a weird. He was actually more odd to me than Bruno was, because Bruno was consistent with his behavior, but at the same time, it was more of an obsession. He loved him, wanted to do right by him, and then I think as he got more drunk, he just lost control of all that. He wanted so badly to be in Guy's life that he was even messing up his own life and his relationship with his mom and things like that, which I think he never, like you were saying, Keith, like, he thought his mother was more infatuated with being a socialite than caring about the father. And so he was like, I'm going to help my mom and I'm going to give her this gift. And then he takes that away from her. And so now what relationship he had with her is kind of broken. And so now all he has is Guy. And, like, Guy is a thing for him to, like, because no one else cares about him, He's
definitely fixated on him. But did you think it was kind of strange to Guy? I mean, I would have let him drown, because he kept turning up like a bad penny. No matter what, he turned around, there he was. And then he finally gets his chance, and he goes and saves him out of some weird kind of...
Well, he tries to save him, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I think it was an infatuation with, wow, this person knows what I went through, and so I went through, like, maybe, I don't know, like that, it was kind of confusing as well, because I was like, why would he go and save him?
Try to save him, yeah.
Maybe Guy's one of these kind of people that loves people to be infatuated with him. I mean, Anne's infatuated with him. That gives Guy his strength. Bruno's infatuated, so maybe he's getting strength from that. Maybe Guy's one of these people that he just wants people to look up to him because he's...
Well, Miriam wasn't infatuated with him, and look what happened to her.
Well, she was, though, because she didn't want to get a divorce. Like, she kind of was like, well,
it was the 50s.
Yeah, but she in the movie she's really clearly painted differently, but in the book she's more like can we just hold off? Because, you know, I did get myself into this situation, and she's almost kind of like, there's still something there. He's mad, I think, because he's in this situation where he's like, God, I have to get a divorce, and now, you know.
Well, you got to think. I mean,
like
we're talking about. You're talking about how Miriam's supposed to be the you know, slut shamed and everything. Well, how did he fall in love with Anne so quickly? I mean, what wasn't he out doing the same thing?
I think it was a social climbing thing. So I think, as Keith was saying earlier, in the novel, it's painted like they were high school sweethearts, him and Miriam.
Right.
They got married. They did what everyone else does. We get married, and then he realized she was looking at all the other boys, and
he was also ashamed of her as well.
Yeah, he was ashamed of her, and he was looking at other careers, right? He wanted to advance himself, and then just happened to meet Anne, who could help advance him even more. So I think he, being a social climber, was like, there's an out for us both, right? So why don't you go and be the country girl who lives and does what you do, and I'll be the city boy, and I'll go what I'm going to do. And she happened to get knocked up, and he's like, well, we're still married. We need to nullify this. And she's just kind of like, but he dumped me. So can we just wait? Cause I don't want, you know, like, it's almost like I don't want people to know. And I'd rather figure this out first. And then she ends up losing the baby. And I think she is going to divorce him. She's just like, okay, you know what? I lost a child. This is a second chance for both of us. Right. And then that happens. So it's kind of like one of these things where you're like,
I mean, another thing I think you have to take in reflection here is that Miriam, even though we think this thing over, but you also have to remember that when Miriam dies, and then you have the courtroom and Miriam's family's there, and the way that they react towards Guy. Now you can sit there and go, "Oh, he did it," but they know that he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
But maybe we're under the assumption. I mean, we're kind of making an assumption that maybe Guy was the most fantastic person, that they were married and But there probably was a lot of problems in their marriage.
Oh yeah.
And how do we know that? How do we know it was Miriam that broke up with Guy and it wasn't Guy that just left him?
True.
And how do we know that Guy was even present during their whole marriage together?
Correct. Yes.
You know, and there are a lot of questions asked there, and you know, with the novel, it kind of addresses these, but it kind of addresses them to, like, you know, they're kind of there if you read into them.
Right.
You can find them, but you kind of just wash over them as well, because you're kind of caught up with a lot of other stuff that's going on at the time.
Yeah.
I think what you have is Patricia Highsmith, the way that she's written this novel, she's written this thing that Guy is going to be, you know, Guy's going to be the hero, and then Bruno's, and then they're going to do this thing with here, and then you're kind of like caught up in the world, in the life of Guy, basically. You know, and you know, and your world's now gonna, you know, from the beginning of the book, your world is now Guy's world, and this is what we have. But then when you do scratch beneath the surface, as we're discussing here, you actually do realize that there's a lot more wrong with Guy than you first anticipate.
Yeah.
You know, from discussion that we, you know, were able to just bring out some of it. And maybe, maybe Miriam is, you know, okay, yeah, she's pregnant with another man's guy, and this guy's married, but maybe all Miriam wanted was someone to love her.
I don't think if I remember correctly, wasn't it more like Bruno proposing that Guy not like Miriam, like, oh, don't you want to kill her? Like, I definitely know in the film, it's kind of like, well, I know who you are, and aren't you the guy, and aren't you getting ready to marry? Like, so he knows a lot about him. But in the book, if I remember correctly, it's almost like, well, who would you murder? Oh, you know, and they're kind of hemming and hawing. I think it's almost as if Bruno is like, wouldn't you murder Miriam? I mean, like, no. And then it kind of is like, oh, but you should. Like, you told, like, and he almost like proposes, like, that's who you should murder. Like, I don't think it's like he hates her. Like, in the novel, I never felt like he hated Miriam. Like, I don't think he loathed her so much that he wanted her
Miriam
dead.
was just a problem.
Miriam,
Miriam is like the stop sign that was stopping him from continuing his life. But I think the most interesting thing, if you want to know more about Miriam, what kind of person Miriam's like, if Miriam is such a horrible person, why is Miriam such good friends with Guy's mother?
Correct. Yes.
Which I think tells a lot about the
situation. Absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, again, small town living, you don't really know what happens behind closed doors. And there is like an instance where, you know, I think it does it in the movie. I don't know if it actually does it in the novel. I can't remember. When there's a squabble. No, it's actually in the movie. There's a squabble, and there's a guy who says, you know, we don't want that here in our, you know, we don't want your family problems here in this establishment. And so at that time, everybody behind closed doors in a small town, I'm sure talked about like how things would happen. But the mother, I'm sure his mother bonded with her and was kind of like, you have to do right by your wife. And all he wants to do is leave her behind and be like, I'm big city boy. I want to move on. I don't want this small town living. And the mother, of course, wants her boy there, that she's going to want him to stay in this small town living with her because he has to do right by her.
I mean,
and she's from a different time. Divorce was not a concept, right? No, you shouldn't get divorced. And it's like, Mom, we're modern, right? We can both get divorced. It's fine. It's still taboo, but it's okay, you know? And I think the pressure I'm sure from his mother and from her were kind of like, well, maybe we can make this work. And I think there's a part of him like, nope, we're not going to make this work. You got pregnant by another man. We should just end this. I think Marion had a question of whether or not the guy doesn't want me. So maybe we should try to do this. And he's like, no, like it's someone else's kid, you know?
And I think, I mean, if you want to put this in the modern setting, which is quite interesting if you want to look, you know, as a final thought for Guy and Miriam, is that Guy and Miriam get married out of high school. Guy goes to university to get his architectural degree. Who's supporting the family? Is it Miriam? Is Marion supporting her man? And as soon as her man gets a bit of fame, and then he trades her in. And we get this every day with sports people or whatever like this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
A woman who's been with someone, you know, from the very beginning. And then, you know, that person all of a sudden graduates, becomes successful. They dump the person who worked with them to do there. And they marry someone who's going to bring them up the social ladder.
Well, it's also, again, it's elitism, right? So if you aren't classy or you're not the same level of classy, it's like, oh, well, you don't understand. So I'm just going to part from you and I'm going to get a newer model that gets it, right? And then all of a sudden that's not good enough. And now you have to even go even higher and you got to keep climbing that ladder. And eventually it becomes like
and they get younger and younger. Next thing you know, they're marrying a fetus.
Well, and it's also, it's the exchange of revenue, right? So imagine you now are a millionaire or, you know, in this case, millionaire is a lot back then. Imagine you meet someone who is a socialite and it's like, you should meet my daughter because we should keep the money here, right? You know, I know you could take care of her and I could take, you know, so I think it just becomes a barter thing.
So let's get to our final thoughts of the book. Dave, do you want to give us any final thoughts of Strangers on the Train, the novel?
It's been years since I've read it, you know, and I read it for college. My memory on it is a little hazy. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion of the movie. It was a book that, like Jaws, in relation to the movie, wasn't quite as strong. It was more of a rough draft of what was to follow. It's a good book, not a great book.
And what about yourself, Vicky? What are your final thoughts of Strangers on the Train?
I kind of agree with Dave. It's a good book. It's not a great book, but I liked it. I mean, I found it kept me interested. Where I usually sometimes it takes me a week to read a book. Sometimes it takes me a few days, but I read this one pretty quick. So, I mean, it wasn't bad.
And what about yourself, John?
I actually appreciate Patricia Highsmith, the approach of this book. I think now I actually do want to read Talented Mr. Ripley because I did see the movie years ago.
Yeah.
I appreciate the approach of like trying to break from norms and trying to break from social norms, the taboos and like kind of dealing with taboos. And like, like when I was actually telling a friend of mine that we were doing this, we were covering this, and I was talking about the novel and the film, he was like, oh my God, that's a very interesting plot. You know, a guy meets a guy on a train and they kind of plot each other's murder. And I was like, it is. And I see that it could be replicative, right? So it would be interesting to see if they ever decide to remake this and do this, you know, modern version of this.
They may throw them off the train.
Yeah. So, and I mean, there's another one, which when we talk to the film, we'll talk about Match Point.
Right.
I'll talk about Match Point. But it's like one of these things where it started from Patricia and she wrote these very interesting, complex characters that I think are different from anything that I've ever read. So I, give her kudos for being able to bring them to life.
And myself, I'm I'm a very big Patricia Highsmith fan. I've read everything that she's written. For people out there who like short stories, she does this fantastic thing about animals killing people. Short stories about animals taking back control of the world, which are a very good selection of short stories. And I'm a big fan of her Ripley books and stuff like this. And so for me, I'm a bit tainted as far as this goes. So I'm probably not the most honest, but I love Strangers on the Train because it is Patricia Highsmith. I'm a really big fan of 1940s and 1950s literature. I like the way that things are written, and I like the way that there's so much going on underneath that's not written about. And that's why I'm a huge fan of this book. And I do like Strangers on the Train, which, we will do a comparison at the end. But I like the novel a lot, only because there's so much complexities in everything. For a book that seems so simple on the surface, that when you get involved, I like the complexities that unravel before your eyes. And I like the uncertain ending of it. I like that you, the reader, from everything that you're told, can actually surmise what you think is going to happen to Guy. And so what I quite like about that is that we are thrown into the role of Guy. We are uncertain of what the decision should be about him, but same way that his decisions are about himself. And that's what I quite like about Strangers on the Train.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to cut to a commercial break and the film trailer for Strangers on the Train, the Alfred Hitchcock's 1951 classic. And we'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
Amazon. Oops, wrong Amazon. Although we both contain an array of diversity, the rainforest with all of its animals and us with all of our products, come check us over today and find all the products you need quickly and efficiently. And buy it with one click. And now you can even use us to donate to your favorite charities using Amazon Smile. Amazon Smile is worth your while. Come check us out today.
We are one planet. We share one extraordinary home. We are millions of wonders, but we are all one world. If we only get one chance to save our planet, to protect it for the next generation, then we have to take it. This is our chance. This is our fight. For our planet, for our home, for all of us. Join WWF today.
I beg your pardon. Aren't you Guy Haines? My name is Bruno Anthony. Want to hear one of my ideas for a perfect murder? Two fellows meet accidentally. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders. Crisscross.
I may be old-fashioned, but I thought murder was against the law.
You think my theory's okay, Guy? You like it?
Sure, Bruno, sure. Now, everything didn't go smoothly. She doesn't want the divorce.
But you sound so savage, Guy.
Sure, I sound savage. I feel savage. I'd like to break her neck. Now, who did you say this is?
Bruno, Guy. Bruno Anthony. Don't you remember, on the train? Is your name Miriam?
Right here. How did you...
Are you trying to tell me? Why, you maniac!
But Guy, you wanted it.
There seems to be no way of diplomatically breaking tragic news. It concerns your wife. She's been murdered.
Miriam murdered?
She was strangled.
You're just as much in it as I am. We planned it on the train. Crisscross.
How did you get him to do it?
He's a maniac. I met him on the train going to Metcalf, and now a lunatic wants me to kill his father. Bruno, I've decided to do what you want.
I still think it'd be wonderful to have a man love you so much he'd kill for you.
Well, then am I correct, Mr. Haynes, in assuming that you have no intention of going ahead with our arrangement?
None whatsoever.
I don't like to be double-crossed. I have a murder on my conscience. But it's not my murder, Mr. Haynes. It's yours. I'm not going to shoot you, Mr. Haynes. I'll think of something better than that. Much better.
Better keep on your toes. Something funny's going on.
Guy Haynes is taking chances I've never seen him take.
Excuse me, madam. I need your help. We're chasing a man.
Haynes, hold it!
morning face. You get it when you don't sleep well. This is what happened to Linda.
Morning, guys.
Good morning. Ah, what is that thing?
It's me, Linda.
Oh my God, it talks! Run!
No, it's me, Linda from HR.
It looks hungry! Save the children! Save them!
What?
Stay back, I've got mace!
Ow, that went in my eyes.
Quit moving!
It's called beauty sleep for a reason. And there's never been a better time to get some.
Get 20% off IKEA Sultan mattresses. IKEA, love your home.
Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
I have a bunch of favorite movies. I watch them all on Shudder.com for only $4.99 a month.
That's a scary low price.
But if I had to pick a favorite, it'd probably be Scream.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the only streaming service that lets me watch hundreds of horror movies on demand.
I'll be right back.
Hello? Hello? Hello, are you gonna subscribe? Hello?
Go to Shudder.com to subscribe, if you dare.
Hello, welcome back. We're now going to be discussing Alfred Hitchcock's 1951 classic film, Strangers on the Train. Interesting things about Strangers on the Train. This is one of Alfred Hitchcock's top 5 films by critics, who thinks this is one of his best, though Alfred Hitchcock thinks this is one of his worst films. He didn't like this version. He didn't like the, in quotations, British version, which is basically a premiere version. The premiere version never showed in Britain, but it is considered the British version, which is slightly different scenes and slightly different subtext.
Can I say something? Yeah. Filmmakers sometimes revel in irony. So Hitchcock was like, one of my best films is The Trouble with Harry. I never want to watch The Trouble with Harry again. This is one of his best films. He's just being weird. He's just, by saying this is one of his lesser films, which critics clearly disagree with, he's just trying. He's looking at it from a different perspective. It's like Lucas looking at the original Star Wars without the special editions added and saying that I'm not very proud of it. It really needed this other stuff to put it over. It's an okay film. And then when he has the special editions come out, this is the film I always wanted. Meanwhile, in the audience's eyes, it's lesser than what the original film was. So he probably had some strange standard, something never quite connected. He never got one camera shot he wanted. And for all of that, he writes it off as no consequence, when in fact, for me, it's easily the top 3.
I think the reason why, from what I was reading, the reason why he was not armored, I think that he had restrictions put on him for this film where he didn't normally have restrictions on other films. And I think he wanted to stick more closely to the novel, and he wanted Guy to commit the murder, and he couldn't do that because of the Hays Code. And
would that be more like in the direction of Vertigo? It's like, hey, we're being shocking for the sake of being shocking.
I think with him, I think he liked the story of. I don't think he liked good over Trump's evil. I think he likes the middle ground. Because you would see that in Psycho and his other things, where even the good man's not exactly good. Yeah, and I think here he was forced to make Guy all American and good. And I think that's probably what rubs him off the wrong way with this film a little bit.
Yeah, and that doesn't affect the film in any negative way. I feel like.
I think it's just the way I'm talking about. This is just his view. I think that if he was able to do it the way that he wanted, would have been a better film, or would have been a worse film. I don't think
it would have been a more European film. It would have been a more daring European film. Would it have been enough to be a film? Not necessarily. It might have even been a lesser film if you got to do that.
Yeah. So it's really hard to say, but it's quite interesting that he
might have had something to do with Farley Granger. Farley Granger is clearly not a Jimmy Stewart. He's sort of like 1950s answer to Hayden Christensen. My buddy and I were watching this film a few years ago, and he's like, he's got a real Hayden Christensen quality to it. Which is sometimes he's on, sometimes he's off, sometimes he's kind of awkward and never quite convincing. He's better here than he was in Rope. It's kind of amazing that Hitchcock recast him. Maybe that was a studio decision. But he's not, at the level of Tony Perkins or his usual leading man.
Well, some interesting thing about Farley Granger is that when he put Farley Granger in this film first, he had to shoot around Farley Granger's camp way of walking, he said. And so when he decided to use him for rope, he said he could use him for rope because he realized that he could keep that homosexual subtext going with him without actually seeing him walk.
Yeah.
So that's what Alfred Hitchcock said about Farley Granger.
And then later he came out of the closet, like decades later. So
yeah,
hey.
So.
And you kind of see that within this film too, just his interaction with Bruno. You definitely are. I kind of was like, wow, he's really intently looking at. And I know that's supposed to be the character of connecting, but he's really looking at Bruno like, hey, how you doing?
I mean, I guess another thing is that, this is a film that he did with Warner Brothers. This is not his normal Universal.
Yeah.
And I think with Universal, I think he had a lot more freedom with Universal. And I think if you look at the Warner Brothers films, there's this, Thou M for Murder was Warner Brothers. There's North by Northwest. And I think he had a lot more freedom on that one.
Was Rebecca?
Rebecca was Selznick. So that was his first American film. And I think, this is him finding his way through the whole American film system, which he had a lot of freedom in Britain. I think he knew how to manage his freedom with Selznick. He knew how to work Selznick to his ability, not to Selznick's ability, but to his ability. And I think when he went to Warner, I think this is one of his first Warner films. I think that he's still trying to figure out how to work within the Warner Brothers. So maybe there's a lot going on behind the scenes that puts a negative spin on the film for him. Maybe there's a lot of politics going on.
Yeah. Well, there is definitely politics, especially when you look at Warner Brothers kind of made him pick their stars. And so like one, for instance, obviously being Ruth Roman, it's almost as if like he wanted, or he had visions of who these characters should be for his film. And I think any director has that sort of perspective, right? So when you're forced by the studio to cast your like leading lady, like that's, for him, I think at one point, I think was it, who was saying it, said, Granger diplomatically described it as Hitchcock disinterest in the actress. And he said he saw Hitchcock treat Edith Everson the same way on the set of Rope. He had to have one person in each film that he had to harass. And I was like, oh my God, that's so horrible. Too. It's literally like, you're going to be my punching bag because what the studio makes me do, I'm going to just lay into you. So it's interesting.
Well, he had a problem with somebody that was on the set. Oh, I guess he fired him. I guess he said something about him getting out of the car or something. He said that, I can
no, I think he's just a very strong-willed personality, obviously, and I think he has a vision of where he wants things to be. And even
he was a so-and-so to work for.
Even trying to get a writer for this was like, he went through how many writers? He went through like 4 or 5 different writers to find where he finally got what he wanted.
I had it marked.
The quite interesting thing is that he bought the rights to this before the book was even published.
Yeah,
$7,500.
And Patricia Highsmith wasn't very happy when she found out who bought the rights because she thought she could have got a lot more when she realized that it was going to be Alfred Hitchcock.
So. Yeah, because he went under a pseudonym.
Didn't he do it incognito of because he didn't want? Yeah, he said he kept his name out of the negotiations to keep the price low.
Well, he did that. He did that with Psycho. He did that with most of the books that he bought the rights for.
So. I didn't know he did that.
I guess what we can say about Alfred Hitchcock, he sure knew how to get a book before it actually was published. He was king of that.
Yeah.
I mean, you consider the book came out in 1950 and the film's out in 1951, 6 months after the book is released. So it's tell what's going on there.
Yeah. He and Raymond Chandler did not like each other. I guess he called him a fat bastard trying to get out of his car or something like that. He decided it's like, hey, you're out of here.
Well, I think, with Hitchcock as well, I think Hitchcock used to like writers who didn't have a lot of their own fame behind them. And maybe I can imagine that we got some Raymond Chandler, who's like the great Raymond Chandler, working with the great Alfred Hitchcock. I imagine there's a lot of egos to play. So
yeah, absolutely.
So John, do you want to start the discussion of Strangers on the Train?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to say that I love the cinematography for this. There's a lot of great shots, and they shot this film in California and in New York. Some of the different scenes that you see, like Penn Station, you see all these different scenes. It definitely it paints an homage to like the city versus suburb life too, because then you have like the not city versus suburb, like the elitism, I should say, not suburb, the elitism that you see of like DC, and you see how these people are living in these mansions. But I just love the cinematography, the noir feeling of the film. I definitely resonated more with the characters in the film than the book, because it was more believable from the perspective of Bruno, who is very much a manipulator and was really good at being a manipulator. And you could tell he's done it many times, versus like the drunken version we get from the book, who is just constantly deteriorating. He has an infatuation with Guy, but not like an obsession with Guy, like within the novel, I think.
I think what I quite like about Strangers on the Train, I like he uses what we call a doppelganger effect. He does use this in Shadow of a Doubt, but here he does it a lot more, where there's two of everything, and the theme this is doubles, and I think Guy
doubles being a term in tennis, which is often.
Well, even how the start of the film is the two taxis, the two pair of feet, the two sets of train, the rails. I mean, it's like he was saying, it's sort of like a serving an association with the world of light and order versus in the vitality of the world versus dark chaos and lunacy, right? It's like
doesn't Hitchcock in his cameo even carry a double bass?
Yeah.
11 minutes into the film.
But we also get, we get Miriam, and then we get Anne's sister, or doppelgangers. So it's quite interesting. I think it's quite an interesting thing.
You know that he made her wear those Coke bottle glasses. He wouldn't let her wear the regular glass. He made her actually wear like the real thick lenses, and I guess that sometimes the actors had to guide her.
Yeah. They said there's one scene where she had to use the table as kind of because she had no facial reference.
I heard a funny story that Bruno Anthony, Robert Walker, wore glasses. This actress did not wear glasses, so he said blind leading the blind in their scenes because he couldn't see and he couldn't see. And to my understanding, Hitchcock gave the actress the choice to go in, pick some glasses from our collection, whichever one speaks to you, and that's the one that she chose.
Interesting. I mean, I just feel like that prop in itself was so pivotal. That and the lighter were two pivotal things in itself. They were characters.
You saw the murder and the glasses, the lens. That was really. I guess that was considered. I'm not a filmmaker, but they said that was one of the more brilliant shots. It still stuck.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to be able to capture something from a reflection, from a reflective point of view, and yeah, I mean, I thought that was such a brilliant shot.
It was a great shot.
It's one of the defining characteristics of him as a filmmaker, shots like that. If you were to show me that shot and I didn't know who the filmmaker is, I would think, well, it's very Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
How he plays with imagery, and I think he does it masterfully. And one of the reasons I love the film.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to sit there and say, with the murder of Miriam, I also like, which Hitchcock does portray very well, he murders them. There's, after she drops to the ground, and then he like wipes his hands off, a little bit like Lady Macbeth getting rid of the crime and getting rid of the guilt sort of thing, and he walks away. And when you do get the reflection in there, it's the coldness of the murder, and it just reflects how cold it really is, how there's just no feeling. He doesn't care. There's nothing about that. And I thought that's where Hitchcock's really, really good is. And I think this comes from his silent movie background, is that he's able to tell a story. You don't need a lot of great script. All you need to be able to tell it through pictures. And he does this very, very well in this film.
I think it's interesting, though, how they build the hatred for her, right? Because you don't get that in the novel, where when Guy actually comes to Marion to talk to her about getting a divorce, and he gives her money to pay for her own lawyer, and she's just like, oh, thanks, I'm not getting divorced. And they just make her so like
hateful.
Oh, yeah, I want you to kill her now. Like it just like it was an intentional, I think, thing to be like we want the fans to be like, kill her, kill her, because she
she's
just
such a bitch in the movie.
And then not only that is, and you do see her in here. She's running around with two boys. You don't know who these guys are, but she's running around and she's being very flirty. And then she's pregnant still, so she didn't lose a baby. In this, she wasn't. She was like, oh, what was she eating? The ice cream? And she goes, I just had a hot dog. He's like, a hot dog? She goes, yeah, I have cravings. I'm like, so she's out pregnant, but she's like, hey, I'm going to go party up at these boys, and then she's being flirty with Bruno. Right. And then she's engaging with him and she's like,
kind of doing a dance, weren't they? Kind of like
totally.
She was looking at him and she was licking her ice cream and looking at him.
Yeah, I mean, it was totally flirtatious. Like he's trying to woo her and get her like, I'm going to get you to like me, right? And it is that cat and mouse. And so when he confronts her and he's like, so are you married? And she's like, yeah. And then he like chokes her out. That's even more like, to me, like she's thinking, oh, hi. Right. Oh, you want to talk to me? Oh, trying to be all... And she's less country, right? So that's the other thing, is she's not as like
not country at all.
No, and she still has a bit of like suburb, like sophisticated in some ways, like white picket fence type of living. So
no,
she's thinking, oh, look at me, like, oh, hi,
She's hateful, You don't feel bad for her at all, But it was a cold killing, though. I mean, they're really. It was just icy. I mean, she was alone. No one. I mean, what a horrible way to go. For one, she's getting choked by somebody you don't know, and everybody.
Is it better to be choked by somebody you do know?
Yeah. Well, and by the way, she was near Lover's Lane. Let's be clear. There was a bunch of people making out there, so I'm sure that's not the first person was like choked out.
Well, I have to say this is a little bit bizarre about that whole situation, because she goes there with two guys.
Right.
Now in the book, there's like two guys and her friend, who's a girl, and her. In the book, this is what we have. Here, her and two guys. So are they going to have like a three-way? Are they going to have like a Merriam sandwich?
Yeah,
in Lover's Lane.
Well, that's what it was looking like.
And by the way, on the boat, the guy is definitely like touching her, and she's like, oh, well, they're already starting something, right? And so I think she knew what she was kind of getting herself into. That's probably why, he like, there's a line from the Golden Girls. He slipped me something, apparently, like meaning she's pregnant. So she like literally.
You're quoting the Golden Girls.
Yeah, because there's a line for the Golden Girls where it's like, literally, it's like, oh, I don't know how I ended up pregnant. I was unconscious. And then she goes, he slipped me something. And the mother goes, apparently, meaning you got pregnant. Of course he slipped you something.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be any different if I knew somebody that was choking me, Dave.
Yeah.
In regard to your statement.
Most scenarios are pretty lousy. Can we talk about the casting of Robert Walker as Bruno? Because
he was the best.
Yeah,
he's what carries this film. He's fantastic.
I remember, because I was always fascinated. I was always fascinated about this character, and Robert Walker had never done, to my understanding, anything like this before, and he had unfortunately passed away 8 months after the shooting of this film. So this could have been the beginning of a whole new career for him
absolutely
as a fascinating character actor, but he never got that opportunity. He was the light leading man, I guess you could say, sort of like the Michael Cera. He's probably getting those type of roles in the early part of his career, just the meek leading man, and to see what he did with this was fascinating.
I think out of the two characters that resonated so much with the film was him, and as well as Anne. Anne was just smart and capable, and she was figuring things out way before anyone else was. And there was these moments where when the police come to talk to Guy, she's looking at the interaction with him going, what did you do? Like, you can clearly see her going, something's going on, like, and she knows what's going on, and she's kind of like trying to figure it out her own way, and then she's noticing when he slips up and he lies. So I definitely resonated more with the cat and mouse game that Bruno was playing, and then Anne being the detective. In a way, it's like, oh, I forgot the detective's actually there, and that these police are watching him. They became sort of ancillary. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
My film professor's hot take on Bruno was that he was the most flagrantly gay character in early Hollywood history. And I was thinking, like, I didn't even notice that on first glance.
I didn't.
But even Hitchcock, I was just reading before, Hitchcock was suggesting that he had to be very subtle with it because the code.
Yeah.
So Hitchcock was suggesting, Bruno's gay. I hadn't seen it I hadn't noticed it the first few times that I had seen it. Obviously, I was like 14 years old when I first. I was studying Hitchcock films as a kid, going to my local library, taking out VHS tapes, and this was one of them. And this easily became one of my favorites. But I never noticed that aspect until I got to college, and my professor was helping me dissect the film, and had pointed out that this is a little bit of a love triangle right here, but not in the way that you anticipate.
Well, but I think it's interesting because yes and no, because he's very flirtatious with Marion. Then he's very flirtatious with Anne. And so there is this sort of like where the author gets into the talented Mr. Ripley, the ability to mask yourself and be whoever you want for you to be. Right. And that's where the psychopathic sort of thing kicks in. He's such a wooer, right? He woos everyone around him, even to the point where he has these old bitty socialite women where he's like, do you mind if I choke you out?
Choke you.
She's like, sure. Sure, why not? Here, go ahead. Put your arms around my neck, and
as long as you give it back afterwards.
Yeah.
You guys, one thing I noticed about Robert Walker is he's got a little bit of a resemblance to Bill Murray, younger Bill Murray.
Oh, yeah. I see that.
And that would be an interesting bit of casting. I know Bill Murray's his approach to acting changed over the years, but I can imagine a 40-something-year-old Bill Murray doing this role.
Yeah.
Being fascinated.
Yeah, I could too, actually.
I just like that he was more of a manipulator, and it was actually more plausible of him trying to get Guy to kill his father because he was blackmailing him. Like, I could do this to you. I could just do this to you. Oh, and then I have this, and you want me to just go talk to Anne? I could tell her right now. Like, it was more believable. Like, he was pushing Guy, like, you're going to do this, whether you like it or not. And then I was actually really pleasantly surprised at the approach of, like, Guy actually going to talk to the father and be like, I'm going to work this out. That was all more believable than what was in the novel to me, because it was like, there's this trickery and this cat and mouse game that's going on that the build up for it, especially when it gets towards the end. It was antsy. I was like, what's happening? What's going to happen? What's going on? And there, the tennis match, and then him trying to get that, like, you could feel the build up. It was a gradual build up to where you wanted to know who was going to be the victor in the situation, because it kind of was, you just didn't know where it was going to go. And I love that feeling of the characters and how he was able, specifically Bruno, was able to bring it.
I like the scene with the carousel. I thought that was something.
In the climax or earlier?
Well, at the end.
It's too bad that it looks so, sped up. I always thought that was one of the downfalls of it. The filmmaking itself was great, but the effect, never quite convincing.
You don't like that the little kid was like hitting him. I guess.
All the kids.
That's fine, but the effect,
something like this.
There was that effect that they did in the time. You could see it in early James Bond films, even where you crank the different frame rate, which will make it look faster, but it never looks. It looks like a Benny Hill.
Yeah.
Didn't they photographed it was a blown up? Was it a toy or something? It was small, and he had explosives right to it to make it look like it had blown apart.
I think part of it, but then I think they actually did. It looks like they did a bigger model of it too. That was the aftermath of it all. So you could tell that there was like the effects of it, like spinning around out of control. That was all like probably a toy, and then the aftermath, the way they set that up. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite scenes, honestly, and you're gonna, it's when they're all in the Anne's dad's place, and they're talking about, after the detective leaves, they're talking about, well, what do we do in this situation? And one of my other favorite characters is Barbara, because Barbara is such a sassy,
smart little thing.
No, but she's just sassy, and there's something about her. Like she had this great line where she's talking. She says, she goes, she was a tramp, the father, she was a human being. Need I remind you that even the most unworthy of us has a life and a right for the pursuit of happiness? And her response, for what I hear, she pursued it from all directions. So, so sassy. Like she
was a nice little addition to the movie. I enjoyed her character quite a bit myself.
And then she like goes to go out of the room and she goes, I don't know about you, but I would love a man to commit a murder for me. And I'm like, Jesus, like this is like
it sounds very Raymond Chandler. This was actually the last screenplay that Raymond Chandler was listed as a writer on. So that does sound very much in his ballpark. I wonder if he's the one who wrote the dialogue.
Yeah, because she was great. And then the father, I think, was funny too. He's like, he's basically asking, I think he's asking Guy, like, where from? And he's like, Harvard? And he's like so inquisitive. And he goes, no, Delaware Tech. And the father just like looks like, oh. Like he looks like very disappointed. Like he's such an elitist. Like
I mean, I think there's some bit. If I'm going to make any kind of negative connotation with this film, I think the casting of Anne, might have been slightly wrong. Because it's pretty bad when you got a supporting character like Patricia Hitchcock playing Barbara Merchant, Anne's sister, outshining Anne through every scene she's in.
Well, yeah. I'll go you one further. I'm not sure that Farley Granger is cast properly in this.
Correct.
He has his moments, but this is, as I say, compare this to other leading men in Hitchcock films. Rest in peace, Farley Granger. He was okay, but why not great? I think he was forced to use Granger, like you were suggesting before. His choice, according to IMDb, his first choice was William Holden, who was unavailable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think William Holden, he didn't want it.
He thought it'd be too strong of a character.
Correct. Yeah, he wanted something else, so he rejected it. So.
Well, I think Farley Granger does an okay job as Guy, but I think the problem is that Guy is a boring character.
Yes, he is.
Basically,
yeah.
Just imagine.
Stuart was a bit more boring is that he's now a freaking tennis player. And so you're like, oh God, and it's watching him back and forth, like same with his relationships, back and forth.
Just imagine it was a shorter Jimmy Stewart because he doesn't look quite like a tennis player. Like say he was a 5'8" Jimmy Stewart, this role would have been conveyed so much, I think, stronger. The humanity would have been there a bit deep, and I think Stewart could have done it. He can have that meeker side to him, that quieter side to him, and you would have wound up with a stronger, like a much stronger performance. And I think that there was other actors out there, like a young Anthony Perkins, could have easily done this.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that.
I just think he was also a little bit too flirtatious in a way, and I don't know why Hitchcock built that more into Guy. I think I would have built it more into Bruno. It was from the very start. It's almost like there's one of the first scenes of them together. They're so close. It almost like they're going to kiss. And I'm like, what's happening here? Like,
well, it does make you kind of wonder because if you look at Strangers on the Train, everyone considers that it was Bruno who makes first contact, but it's actually Guy who makes first contact by hitting his shoe up against Bruno's leg.
Yeah.
Which is
I like how it's replicative towards the end when someone, I forget what happened, someone does it to someone else and they witness, Anne and him witness that happen. They're like, oh, and then you hear someone go, aren't you Guy? And he was like, we're going to leave. Like, we're going to
go. Here's a little interesting detail I noticed upon this last viewing is it's Farley Granger's character. It's Guy who taps Bruno's shoe, but yet Bruno apologizes. Like it was, Guy hits Bruno apologizes. I find that very odd.
Yeah.
So he was a very odd character.
A red flag that when someone knows more about you than you about them, like, because he's basically, aren't you Guy and aren't you this? And then you're going to marry this girl because I just happened to be reading page 6, this people, and it like I would be a little bit like, okay, it was nice talking to you. Like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. There's some weird thing that you know too much about me.
Guy was very open-minded to somebody who essentially felt like a stalker in that opening scene. It doesn't seem all convincing. If it's me, if it's you, I think I'm going to excuse myself and go to the next room because it's interesting that he went as far as he did, yet Guy still was open to him.
But I also think now just thinking about it, because he was also trying to lead tennis to become a politician, that maybe it's like, oh, I need to start meeting elites, right? I need to start meeting these elites to be like click into things like that. So maybe part of him was, for that reason.
Or maybe Hitchcock was doing some kind of subtext about homosexuality. But
yeah, I've got a question.
The guys in the closet, so therefore, and then.
Yeah, guys and guys.
I've got a question for everybody here. Mm-hmm. When I was writing my essay for college about this film, one of the reviewers wrote that there's a sequence before, because in the movie he does not kill the father. He does not kill Bruno's father.
Yeah.
There's a sequence before he walks into the bedroom where he looks at his gun, he shakes it, he seems to. He looks at it, he puts it back in his pocket, and it wasn't clear to this reviewer if he was actually considering murdering the father or not. And he was saying the limitations of the performance, but was Guy actually considering murdering? And if he did, he would have shot Bruno anyway.
Well, I would say he brought the gun, so why would you bring the gun unless there was a consideration there? So there is at a point, maybe he realized maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do it at a different approach. Maybe if I confess to the father will help me. Because why bring a gun if he wasn't even going to use it?
Or it's a safety net.
Yeah, but the intent is if you're bringing it in case you have to use it. And my thing is, why not just break into the house, sneak into the house, and then have that conversation? And then if you get caught breaking in, but you don't get caught with a weapon. Your thought is like, I'm going to use this in some way or capacity. You wouldn't just bring a gun.
But it is a weird plot device. I mean, I just think that if you're going to go talk to somebody about that their son wants you dead, why are you going to sneak into their house in the middle of the night? Anyway,
yeah.
I mean, I think maybe it's one of those Hitchcock things where he's just trying to build tension. So therefore,
absolutely.
It's like
absolutely, and I've never thought about that before. You know what? I guess that does seem to suggest that he was considering killing the father, because he's there late at night. He's looking at the gun. It just didn't really necessarily come off in terms of performance. It just looks like Farley Granger looking at the gun saying, well, this weighs about a pound, right? Puts it back in his pocket. You don't know what's going on in his head.
Or it's like feeling the weight of it too, like in a I guess if you're looking from a bigger perspective, you're feeling the weight of something you're going to do, right? Literally, you're feeling the weight of a gun, like, wow, I'm going to use this to kill someone. Or no, let me reconsider it,
Or we have to look at when this film came out. When this film came out, Strangers on the Train was the #1 best-selling book. And maybe it was for people who read the book that think, oh, I know what's going on. And Hitchcock goes, no, you don't.
No, you don't. I'm going to put a twist on it. Yeah.
I'm now showing you that I am now really breaking away from the book now here.
Yeah.
Because in this time out, what you thought you know, you no longer know.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a perfectly staged scene. The lights out. As a matter of fact, in my Awaken the Reaper screenplay, I just realized I paid homage to it without even being conscious of it. The light, you're seeing a silhouette of somebody, the light turns on, it's not the character you're thinking.
And that scene is so great because it was like, oh, well, hi, Guy. What are you doing here? And he's the Bruno is so much more mischievous and so like, I'm ahead of you, right? I'm never going to be behind you. So stop trying to fool me. We're going to do this, whether you like it or not. And he's always was one step ahead of him.
Except for when the lighter fell down the drain. Well,
that was unexpected because I think someone bumped into him.
But you could feel his agitation. He did it so well. It's just like, come on, I've got place to be with this thing. And
well, see, I think this is another one of those Hitchcock's I'm going to build tension moments.
Yeah,
and he likes to add this as we know. I mean, as we're coming to the end of the season, and we covered a lot of Alfred Hitchcock. He likes these tension built moments. They don't really mean anything in the whole picture, but they build these little tension moments that you're on your edge of your seat.
Yeah,
like, will we get the lighter? What does this mean? And all this other stuff. And
notice what they parallel it with Guy playing the tennis match, because you don't really care if whether or not Guy wins the tennis match. It's just I'm got to get out of here. I got to come on. Let's go. And it's like keep going, and
And then the lighter as well. You got the A and the G on both sides of the lighter, sort of thing, with the little tennis thing in the middle of it. So the lighter even gives you that kind of bit of, I guess.
He does have
symbolism.
A certain way of making his points and on point in his movies. I did realize this last season. I used to watch them, my mother on Saturdays or Sunday afternoons. But when you start really taking them apart and dissecting them a little bit, you really kind of appreciate Alfred Hitchcock a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And you didn't really allow this stuff really went right over my head. And, years ago when I was watching it, and revisiting all of his movies has been really a lot of fun for me. I've really enjoyed it because, I didn't realize how brilliant the man was.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I didn't.
So another thing I think that's what's quite interesting is that before this, of course, he did Rope. That's in color. This one's black and white. And the whole film, all the morals are black and white.
Yeah.
Which is, but if you look at the novel that we just discussed, that's all shades. Everything's such a grayscale kind of a novel.
Right.
As far as this. But this is, everything about this is black and white. And with the black and white, you have the opposites. You got Bruno, who's strong. You got Guy, who's weak. You got Anne, who's very, very, very put together. And then you got her sister, who's kind of flighty. You have, and you got all these opposites. And good is good, and bad is bad. And
But let me ask you this: is Guy weak because the performance comes out that way and it's not the intention of the writing? Because Farley Granger might have just come off as a weaker character when, if it was portrayed by William Holden, he wouldn't have.
Well, I also think,
good point.
I think it is partially writing because of writing for him. Some of what he is doing, his motivation is very to talk about. Keith saying about him in the novel is that he's passive aggressive about a lot of things. And it's really he doesn't know what to do. And then eventually when Anne finds it out, she's like, let me help you. Because he's so lost, and he doesn't want to pull the family into this. He doesn't want to want to get anyone involved. And she's just like, but you need to deal with the situation or it's going to crash over you like a wave. Right. So we need you to step up. And I think she's probably the one who was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And she literally was like, let's figure this out. And we're going to be there at the match and we're going to get a taxi for you and we're going to get you in the taxi. She's the one who came up with all that. I don't think that was Guy at all. Right.
Let me ask you this.
And Guy plays the victim through everything.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, does the story benefit by Guy being an architect or a tennis player? What is the better take on the character? Because the book was architect.
I think the architect storyline would have worked better because therefore I think it would add a bit more nuance to his relationship with Miriam.
I would say
only because if he's a tennis player, it's okay, well, he's a tennis player. He says, he married Miriam. So you don't. I think if he was an architect, and then it kind of brings the relationship with him, Miriam, a bit more closer. It makes you understand that. With him being a tennis player and marrying Miriam, you're not quite sure what that whole. You have no understanding of what their marriage was.
Other than that, he's a guy, and then therefore Bruno could know his history because he's in a public eye.
Well, that's what I was going to say. He is a celebrity in the sport industry. So I think it makes sense for me. It makes sense that he's a small town boy and he has a small town girl, right? And he really diligently was really good with tennis and he maybe got noticed and then a scout noticed him and he became I'm not a big tennis person, but he became a really professional tennis player. So that brings him to a certain level of elitism that now it's almost and Miriam, I think, hates him for that too. So that's why she maybe pokes and prods him more because it's how dare you leave this town and leave me behind? And it's what, you think you're better than me now? Whereas architect, I don't know if that, he would have to educate himself to become an architect to then become a famous architect versus it's a different type of education when you're a sports person and a scout finds you and he's also a very handsome guy, dapper. So he is marketable, right? All those things he has a certain level of prestige that people now know him. I don't think unless you are into architecture, people are going to know you. right?
Yeah,
Like I don't think that's believable.
But see, I have a problem with the whole crisscross thing. If he was an architect, the whole crisscross thing probably would have worked better than if he's a celebrity. Because
Exactly.
how is the celebrity going to get away with killing somebody and not be noticed?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Sort of thing.
that's true.
I mean, even though in this story the guy doesn't actually go through with the murder or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I also think that if he was an architect, it'd make me feel, and maybe it made me think that maybe he was a bit more. He would have been a bit more
anonymous. He would have been more anonymous.
Yeah.
More anonymous, as you say.
Yeah,
maybe.
because people would know who he is. That's I'm just kind of I guess my thing is like depends on how the way you're trying to portray Guy as from a small town to a big city life, how he got there, and it still was the same that he is he was trying to climb the social ladder in both cases, right? As an architect, because he's like, I'm going to leave the tennis world behind because I'm going to become a politician. And I was like, okay. And it mainly is because obviously money, prestige,
Yeah,
and
but
trying to provide for her, for Anne, trying to give her a life, a perfect life that she deserves,
Yeah.
I mean, I just could picture an architect trying to become a politician more than a sports star trying to become a politician for some
I don't know. He got lots of people. They're actors that are politicians now.
I would sooner say a tennis player because of the celebrity factor. I don't know if anybody who's transitioned from architect to politician.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I guess it's just because this is my own personal view. I'm not saying, any reality to my way of thinking, but I just picture an architect goes to school, has an education, a tennis player. You don't need an education. You have to be really good at a sport. And though you can be very good at what you do, and I'm not taking anything away from people who play sports and stuff like this because it's a different kind of talent.
Yeah.
The American president at this moment, at the time of recording, is a celebrity from a celebrity show. And that goes to show you, I think celebrity tends to transition more commonly into, and as a matter of fact, one of the stars of The Love Boat became a politician. There's
Franken became a politician. There's a lot of people.
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think it's also the popular, being popular. But I didn't really think about what you're saying is if you're popular, you're not going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go commit a murder because everybody you walk down the street, people are like, aren't you? You're like,
right.
And you're like, no, not really,
Yeah. Another thing I'm looking at basically is I'm looking at this film from a 1950s perspective, and politicians were different than they are now.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can become a politician just by having a social media account.
Right.
Correct.
So, but back then, it was I think politicians. I would like. I mean, maybe it was the same, but I'd like to think that politicians it was all a bit different than that sort of thing. So I would think that they tend to look. I know that for instance, when Kennedy was running, it was, that was all about his education.
Yeah, Kennedy didn't have a whole lot of Twitter followers back in 1960.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
But I mean, if you look into politicians, from at least from the 40s to the 60s, it was all about what education they had and what jobs that they had.
And if you fought in the war,
and that's
I would also say though, it's also a prestigious family money. If you were a Rockefeller, that's a business. That's a very lucrative business industry. So of course you're going to rise to the surface. So
Yeah.
I mean, as far as Farley, going back to Farley Granger, I think he does an okay job here. Actually, I'm okay with his performance. I'm not sure if you had anyone that was stronger, would that have taken away from Bruno or Robert Walker's performance? If you had
somebody more authentic is all you needed.
Yeah,
I just think that there was an unbalance to it. I mean, he was okay.
I agree with
Guy was okay, but it was not equally balanced with Bruno. Bruno was just brilliant and cunning.
It was kind of like, say, Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino in Devil's Advocate, like that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe Farley Granger was kind of there for eye candy.
Yeah, totally. Oh, yeah, totally.
I mean, because to be honest, he wasn't a huge star. I mean, if you go through his filmography, whether IMDb or Wikipedia or stuff like this, I mean, he kind of was he kind of just did little bit parts here and there, like in like fluffy
wasn't
musicals and Technicolor films. And
he had worked with Hitchcock before in Rope, though, so that's a big thing.
Yeah, but I think Rope was Universal, so he must have brought him over to Warner, unless Farley Granger, Universal contract was up and he signed with Warner, and when Alfred was working at Warner, because he was traded out for this film, for whatever reasons, maybe he's like, well, okay, I worked with him before, so I'll take him because you're giving me all these people I've never worked with before. Maybe it's something like that. I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I just think that he plays quite well with the whole black and white and the dark and light sort of aspect. So I think he kind of works in that way. I think that I kind of wonder if Guy had a little bit more depth to him, would it be the same kind of film?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And you also got less interaction with Guy with other characters than you did with, like, say, Anne interacted with the detective. She interacted with Bruno's mom, with Bruno. Like, so she had all this sort of interacting going on. His was primarily with Bruno and Anne. Those are it. You know, everyone else he really didn't have that sort of interaction with.
Yeah, and I think I kind of like with William Holden. I love William Holden, you know, and in films that he's done, he was a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of wondering maybe he might have been too strong for it.
That's what they thought. That's why they didn't cast him in that, because they thought he'd be overwhelming for the Bruno character, and that he because let's face it, Bill Holden or William Holden, he's just, you know,
he was a force to be reckoned with. He was one of those kind of actors that basically your eye would have been drawn to him, and you would never be able to pull your eye away from him because he was that kind of an actor,
right?
And then you put him against Robert Walker, and maybe the whole story of Guy would come off totally different. That's what I'm kind of thinking, because I mean, I know I said before, I've only seen Robert Walker in this film. I haven't seen him in anything else, and he's so strong in this.
The other one was, Bruno's mom, which I kept going, God, why do I know her?
She's Aunt Clara.
Yes. I was like, oh my God, she's Aunt Clara, like the ditzy Aunt Clara. Because at one point she does this scene, and I kept in my mind going, why do I remember her being fumbly? Like, just very fumbly, you know? And I was like, oh my God, she's Aunt Clara. Oh my God, I love it.
Well, in the book, they got her like kind of like a fox, I think, because he was admiring her legs, saying his mother's legs were still good, nice and shapely, and why he was checking out his mother's legs, I don't know.
Well, I also thought it was interesting that she, again, was very protective of him, because when the daughter, when Anne, I think, asks her about something, she's very dismissive, like, that's just who he is, and it's okay, it's fine. Would you like some tea? You know, like, she's like, just... let's ignore this.
But see, this is where we get Alfred Hitchcock's. But this is where we get Alfred Hitchcock's mother complex coming through again. The horrible mother. I mean, to be honest, this could be the forerunner to Mrs. Bates.
Oh,
she had that kind of like overbearing mother, the middle-aged son who's never married, and no woman's ever going to be good for the son. Well, not that this son was attracted to women, but there is that the overbearing mother, the whole thing where the mother-son relationship's a bit odd.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have this again when we do North by Northwest, the odd mother and son relationship in that as well. And this seems to be a regular theme in Alfred Hitchcock films, the mother and son scenarios, or even the mother-daughter, like with Marnie and things like that. There's always this weird mother thing that goes on in Hitchcock films.
Yeah, especially when the son does something wrong, she's just like the scene where he says something. He's like, "Oh, mother," and he gets mad, and then she's like, "Oh, my little boy," and she's like, stroking his head. I'm like, "Oh God!" Like it was weird, you know.
I mean, I love the person, Marion Lorne, who played the part of Bruno's mom, or Clara. But
Clara.
But I'm kind of wondering, did he change her and use this actress for the simple fact that he didn't want, if she was, that's the thing, they put someone very attractive for Bruno's mother. I'm not saying that Marion Lorne's ugly, but this is an attractive one, like she was described in the book. And the scenes that we would had played here between Bruno and his mother, don't you think they would have become, all of a sudden, it all becomes very sexual?
Yeah.
If she was really young.
Yeah, she was more, sultry or whatever, and more, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually expected something more. I guess they gave the attributes more to the dad, because the dad seemed killable too, right? Like he was a bit of a dick. he's a bit of like, oh, a guy, like, my son has to go to work and, crotchety. And I expected some of those attributes to be with the mom, but I guess the balance of the mom was the more nurturing and be nice to him, be kind,
I think this is that mother boy thing, mama's boy, isn't it? That's what we get here. Is more of a mama's boy, and I mean we do get in the novel. And this is what the novel and the book here, as far as Bruno's father is concerned. Did you find him? I mean, the thing is, I kind of sided with the father. It's like he's got this useless son who just wants to do fuck all but drink all day long and just live off the money.
To be like a playboy, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I don't think he was a bad.
Well, he was an irritating character.
Brash, he was really brash with him. But I think, looking back, it's like, well, if your son is living off your money and living under your roof,
well, he was a sponge.
Yeah,
but, I mean, he doesn't. The father has a very small role. To my understanding, isn't his only scene, Bruno, I have to talk to you. I'm sorry, Father, taking a call long distance. Like, I feel like the father's really just got one bit of dialogue in that sequence. So, and all of his other he's just described. He's not so much portrayed.
Yeah, it's a bit like Rebecca, isn't it? We never see Rebecca. We just get what the characters and fusions of what Rebecca is, and that's pretty much what he did here with Strangers on the Train. We get the one scene with the dad, but the only thing we know about the dad is the way Bruno describes the father, and the mother is just like, just calm down, dear, sort of thing. So, so we kind of get is like Bruno's version of his father. But then when you hear what Bruno says about his dad, you're thinking, well, actually, your father's quite right. Actually, you're just a spoiled asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
he should have gone to work. He's just jet setting everywhere he wanted to go, and just taking in as much money as he could while he was jet setting. And the father probably just wanted him to man up and
take some responsibility.
Take some, so
bring some money back for the family too, because again, it even doesn't, they might have as much money as God, but let's just say the father wants to make sure that that's his legacy is passed on to his children's children. Not that he probably looks at him and is like, he's never going to have any kids. I'm not, like, in his mind, there has to be a legacy, and the legacy is the money. But if you're depleting it all, then what are we going to have? Like, nothing.
Well, yeah. Well, Bruno's never going to have children either, so the legacy is going to die with Bruno, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Because no one's going to want to wake up next to that every day. So.
Except maybe Guy. Guy would be like, "Hey, Bruno. Hi.
Hey, Bruno.
Bruno's Guy's first wife was taking a shine to him too.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, he's a good manipulator. So technically, I think about this from the talent of Mr. Ripley, like being able to manipulate people. If let's just say his dad kicked him out, I think he'd be very easily to manipulate people to give him things.
So no, I think I would disagree with you, Keith. I think he's supposed to be an attractive character. He's supposed to be an attractive character that's just aloof.
Yeah.
I mean, Miriam, I don't know if we can judge her. I mean, she basically was like a dog in heat, wasn't she? I mean, she was really up against anything, so.
Well, and she was just like, again, a user, because you can clearly see when he gives her the money to pay for the lawyer, she's like, oh, I can buy all these pretty things now. I'm not getting a lawyer. I'm not divorcing you. And like, she just does it in such a, oh, screw you. You're making all this money. You're just going to keep paying me, and manipulative,
Tell me if my recollection of this film is right. I did watch this film a couple of days ago, but when Guy shows up at the record shop where Miriam is Miriam she's in a record booth with one of the guys, isn't she?
No, she's at the counter and she's talking to some woman. Yeah. But the way she looks at him, she's just like, "Oh, it's you." Fine. And then he's like, "Can we talk?" And so then they go into
he starts manhandling her and stuff. And they already looked bad at the beginning of that anyway, because he was manhandling her.
But again, it's also interesting from perspective, right? Because you don't know what the conversation. The people on the outside don't know what the conversation is. All they see is a man assaulting a woman, right? And it's like that. Him grabbing her, and she then, when the door opens and the guy's like, we don't appreciate your family squabbles being brought into our store.
Right.
She plays the victim. I can't. I have to be with him, and he wants to separate from me, and I'm pregnant. And he's like, it's not mine.
Well, I've often felt bad for men as a whole. When it comes to that, because you can have the most vile, wretched bitch with full of vitriol. And, you got to probably just check yourself all the time because you want to bitch slap somebody that's this nasty to you all the time. And then if a man, you probably shouldn't because they're probably strong or whatever, but I just, just give her a good bitch slap across the head.
Well, I mean, I would have personally, if she was what she was doing is so he could have done is walked out of that. Oh, you don't want to get a divorce. Open that door. Hey everyone, she's pregnant with someone else's kid. It ain't mine, and she doesn't want to get a divorce. How do you all agree with this? How do you feel about this? And make her the bad, but he didn't. He was trying to do the right thing, trying to be like
a gentleman.
I want to be a gentleman, but then she got the best of him because then she was like, "Don't leave me. What about our baby?" And he's like, "It's not like." What are you doing? And she's like, I'm not going to let you get away. Like, he's a cash cow to her. Like, you're not going to get away from me. You're going to pay for me and this kid,
Yeah, I see. That's another reason why I wish Guy wasn't enough tennis player. Because you're kind of like, would you really be if you know what she's like, would you really be doing this in public like this if you're a public figure?
Professional, yeah.
Because to be honest, he's in a small town of Metcalf, so obviously not a lot of greatness comes out of Metcalf. So he's going to be known by everybody.
I don't even know where I live in Texas, and I don't even know where Metcalf is. Okay,
well, it's just a fictional small town, probably. But I mean, it'd be like, let's put it like a tennis champion comes out of your hometown.
Yeah,
everyone's going to know who that person is.
Yeah,
I mean, look at what's his name. Vigo comes out of Watertown, and like if Vigo walks down the street, everyone knows who Vigo is because he comes from Watertown. Like you could go somewhere.
Cape Vincent, but
I mean, Watertown grabs him as his very own. So it was like, oh look, it's Vigo Mortensen. You can't go anywhere because his local boy made good in this crack town. So I think so.
Well, everybody else runs into that man randomly, and every time I go home to visit, I can never find him. He's hiding.
I also just think that that's why she can't stand him, or the way she acts towards him is like he got out and she didn't, right? And then she was like, you left, so I'm going to sleep with someone. Oh, now I'm pregnant. Now, so I think she got him there to be like, oh, we're going to get a divorce, right? And he comes there, and her intention wasn't to get divorced. It was more like, you're going to take care of me. Like, I don't care what you say. I'm going to manipulate you, and I'm going to have you take care of me.
And I think that's why I have a slight problem with the murder. I mean, I love the way the murder's done and stuff like this. That has nothing to do with this. But in the confines of the story, I kind of, with the murder of Miriam happens, just like, oh, this is horrible. There's like, but there is a part of you that thinks, oh, this kind of deserves it.
Yeah,
and that's the part that kind of makes me feel a bit unsettled. And I don't know if that was put in there. But I mean, then again, maybe it's looking at this through a millennial point of view now. I mean, God knows.
Don't tell me you're going down there.
No, but I'm talking about, looking at things from a 2019 perspective and then actually living in the 50s and watching this film when it came out, would you feel differently? That's what I'm saying.
I think I would have liked more to know less. That's one thing about Marion's character that I think in the novel it actually worked better, where it was in his head, in Bruno's head, how he thought about her. Yeah. And all he was doing was watching her, and he would see her, maybe touch a guy's shoulder. Oh, look at her, that tramp. Like, look at her just touching guys. Look at her. She just deserves this. I'm going to kill her. And, so you feel more like, oh.
Dislike to her, didn't he? He doesn't mean talking about her plumpness. I guess she was kind of plump and she had red hair, which you can't really. She's totally different in the movie. Anyway, I don't know why the glasses came into it. I can't remember glasses.
Everything to do with the visual. The visual.
Yeah, the visual, yeah. And it was also a good connected piece later when he's, choking out the socialite older woman that he sees a sister, and it's a reflection of, oh my God.
Right. Yeah, all right.
It's like he's thinking it's her, I got to kill her, and it's a very interesting.
It all plays with the doubles and the
correct
systematic thing. I mean, I do like this movie a lot, but
I like it.
But looking at it through like a different kind of lens, there are some things in it you think, as far as character development goes. And I'm not saying that this makes the movie a bad film, because it is a great movie. But I mean, let's face it, Bruno's evil from day one. I mean, like he pops the balloon of the kid. You know what I mean? He does.
Which was a great scene. He's like,
I know.
Yeah, and the only surprising thing is like when he's helping the blind man across the street, you expect him to be pushing the blind man in front of a moving car. He doesn't, but you think that's what he's going to do next?
No, but I'm glad you brought that up because that shows he's not a psychopath in that sense. Like he does.
No, I think
he thinks through.
No, I think he helped the blind man across so that way
it made him look good.
It made him look good, and also gives him. If something happens and he's placed there,
he's trying to get away from a situation though, and he wants.
But it makes him unmemorable. He's helped. It's like this is not a man running away from a crime scene. It's like oh my God, a woman's murdered, and things like people are going to remember someone running. No one's going to remember someone just helping a blind man across the street, not during this kind of frame. And I think that's the more reason behind it. I don't think it's because he's a kind person, just that it gives him a reason to cross the street without doing it in a hurry, and he's not running away from a crime scene. Which would
but even that's conspicuous because like when he's leaving or when he comes off the boat and comes on land again, everyone is like, oh my God, what's happening? And they're looking over. He kind of is like, nothing to see. And he kind of just waddles off. And that's why the guy recognized, because he's like, the guy's like, aren't you interested in what happened? Wait, you just came from over there. And he kind of like I would put two and two together. Like, you're not curious about what just happened. Like you come off of a boat. I'd be like, what is everyone looking at? I would have turned around and been like, what is everyone looking at? Oh, he just kind of gets off like, nothing to see here, folks, and like he just kind of keeps walking, and
See,
so
I'm
that's a
more
little
like
bit more
Bruno.
conspicuous.
I'm more like Bruno. Like when people like pass out in front of the hospital on my way to work, I just walk around them. I don't even look at them because I'm like, nah, I'm not getting involved.
But again, it's just it's weird because like we are so used to as human beings, like we can't turn away from train wrecks. So you're still gonna look. Yeah. You're not gonna go, oh yeah, and then like not like you're gonna look and go, what's going on? And then when you assess, you're like, oh, a person got hit by a car. You're like, and then you kind of, if you jump in to help, or you just go, I can't keep looking at this, and you walk away. You're still gonna assess something. You're not gonna be like, nothing's going on. I don't see it. What are you talking about? Like, and he kind of ignored all that, and I think that's where if he wanted to pretend like blend in, he should have got off the boat and been like, oh, what's happening? And maybe smirk a little bit like, I know what's happening,
So you think that him helping the blind man across the street was a way for Alfred Hitchcock to show that he had a bit of humanity in him?
Yeah, I do. Because again, I don't
doing it just so he wouldn't be noticed.
No, because I feel like if it'd be one thing if he looked around and he saw people looking at him and then was like, oh, I'm going to help this, and grab the guy's arm and like dragged him across the street. That would be different, right? I think it was, he saw the guy being frustrated and he's like, okay, let me help this guy. And like he helped him and he got across the street. So I think it was more like humanizing him, trying to be like, yes, he just did something really heinous and killed a woman, but he's deep down
inside. He's going to help some blind guy go across the street 10 minutes later.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. What about Barbara almost whacking off that guy when she spilled her powder on him at the tennis court?
Oh my God, that was amazing. And like, by the way, I love how he was looking at her and she's like, oh, hey, how you doing? And
then she's like wiping it off. It's like, God, you're going to get close to the family jewels up there, Barbs.
Well, then he goes to run away and she's like clinging to his leg. I was like, get him, girl. Hold on. Don't let him go.
I loved her character. I thought she was really bright ray of sunshine in the whole movie.
Yeah.
I thought she was great.
When she says something else too, and the father's like, you don't have to say everything that goes on in your head, right?
Yeah.
I love Patricia Hitchcock. Does anyone know if she's ever done anything outside of her father's stuff?
No, I don't know. I was curious.
Because, she's memorable in Psycho. She's the one like, oh, I guess pills for that. Sort of thing. Yeah. She always gives these fantastic performances in her father's films. She always has like these small bit parts, but you just kind of like, I just kind of wonder if she ever worked.
But those are some of his best parts, though, as we've all concluded several times.
Yeah, but, she's fantastic in Stage Fright when we covered that as well. Where she's like, making eyes at the guy and stuff like this, and she always does these little bit of things that is like fantastic. So I just kind of wonder if she ever did anything outside.
Well, I'm looking her up right now.
Me too. Yeah.
She has any Skateboard is Mrs. Harris. Ladies in the Corridor, TV movie from 1975.
She was in the Ten Commandments.
Playhouse
Yeah.
90.
He was.
She was in Playhouse 90, but Ten Commandments, it might have been an extra. Was it just a court lady? So
Stage fright.
Well, there are a couple of like television movies that and series that she was on, at least in cameos, little roles. So she did some, and she was even as a producer on The Man on Lincoln's Nose, a documentary short, an executive producer on that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she did direct Alfred Hitchcock's cameo in this film, so
there you go.
But
I know you're probably wrapping up at this point. That we're approaching 2 hours, but I wanted to point out a couple of shots in the film that belong in the Hall of Fame of Hollywood of movie images. The tennis game in which the camera zooms in on the audience looking from left to right. Meanwhile, Bruno is staring straight ahead at Guy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that scene.
Yeah, that was a really intense scene.
Yeah.
And there's obviously the glasses is another iconic image.
And the other one I noticed too is the punch when he punches Bruno, and how he comes at the face, but then it comes at the camera at the same time. Like
Bruno's point of view of being punched.
Yeah.
There was it's the mastery of Hitchcock. You know
Absolutely.
You know, the funny thing about when I was watching this, I've seen this film quite a few times, and when the guy has to crawl underneath the carousel to help stop it. First of all, I don't know why in Alfred Hitchcock films all the people who are shooting are always bad shots. In every single Hitchcock film, none of these people can hit what they're aiming at. Yeah. But when they
Star Wars film.
But when the guy's like crawling underneath the thingy, for some reason, I always thought that guy was the guy from Freaks. You know, the guy with no arms and legs.
Oh God!
I don't know why in my head that's who it is, but the reality is a totally different person who has arms and legs.
I was like laughed too because he's crawling down there, and the detective's like, "Don't let him go down there." He's like, "Do you want to go down there?" He's like, "No, go ahead and let him go down." Like this poor guy who looks like he's in his 70s, crawling underneath this. It's like you would think. They're like, "Oh, just let him. If he gets his head chopped off, oh well, you know, he tried."
For some reason, it's always the guy. In my mind, I always thought it was the guy from Freaks who had no arms and legs. I don't know why.
Just shove him under. See if he can just crawl with his mouth. Like, what do you mean?
Well, I'm sorry, but if you ever seen the movie Freaks, the guy with no arms and legs rolls a cigarette.
Oh, interesting.
Oh yeah, he moves around. He gets around. But anyway, Freaks is something we'll have to cover at some point in our podcast. I love that.
Like we don't do enough of that as it is, but okay.
Yeah. Well, we need to make Vicky feel at home, so. So, is there anything more we'd like to talk about Strangers on the Train?
No, I loved it. I think the two stories, the novel versus the film, they were completely, to me, different animals. And
they were.
But I found I appreciated things about each of them that I loved.
I concur.
Dave, what's your final thoughts on Strangers on the Train, and which one do you prefer, book or novel, book or film?
Of course, I'm going to pick the film. It's also I saw the film as a 13-year-old on VHS and loved it to death. Became one of the causative factors for me becoming a gigantic Hitchcock fan. So I feel you have a great movie versus a good book. The other thing I was going to mention is how wonderful the use of the song and the band plays on is in the course of the movie. It works so well in conjunction with the movie, the music that's played underneath the murder of Miriam and of Guy's wife, and then that comes back later every time Bruno sees the glasses, this track of music comes back, and something that's a waltz in essence becomes something so creepy.
Yeah,
and I think that they did a great use of a song that you wouldn't associate with something macabre.
And what about yourself, Vicky? What are your thoughts? What do you prefer, film or book?
Well, I like what John said. I thought that I liked the book because it got inside the people's minds more, and so you had a little more backlighting towards that. But when you get to the film, it had, like Patricia Hitchcock in it and people like that just added so much more to it and made it really interesting. But I thought they were both good in their own different ways, because they're, like John said, they're completely different. So I liked the book a whole lot. I like the movie too. So I kind of throw them both out there to everybody and say, hey, check them both out.
And John, yourself?
I resonate more with the film just because the plot of the film, I think it makes
more believable.
Sense. Yeah, it's more believable. But I think with the book, I do like the internal workings of Bruno's mind and Guy's mind is very well shown. So I would say my favorite was obviously the movie, but the book, I do appreciate the story.
Sort of like Cujo.
Yeah, and she also built these characters, these very complex characters, and like bravo for her for kind of reaching into a taboo like this. And because even when I mentioned it to a friend, it's sort of like, wow, that's a very interesting story that was written in the 50s. So you're like, wow, and now
you
it still
and Keith
resonates.
just came up with 50 different ways to try to pull it off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Disappearing around both of them will know.
Well, if you ever want to kill someone, I'm the person to come to. I know how to get rid of a body.
I would also say, too, the movie Match Point is similar to this. So if you've never seen Match Point, it's actually a really good movie that it's similar, but it's not. And it's all about, can the person get away with murder? It's really interesting.
And from myself point of view, I kind of look at these as two different animals. I think as a novel, I think Strangers on the Train is one of the greatest American novels out there. And I am, biased towards Patricia Highsmith. I think anyone who's really interested in 40s and 50s literature, I think you can't go wrong. And as far as Alfred Hitchcock's, number of his great works, I think Strangers on the Train hit them. I find it difficult being able to pick the two of them, because I do think they're two people with kind of like the same thin plot lines going through them, but each one gives you a lot more depth than what the plots actually entitles them to have. So I think it's one of Alfred Hitchcock's masters of a film, and I think it's one of Patricia Highsmith's greatest novels. So I'm going to stick by that. I can't really pick one over the other, because I think they're too different from each other to be able to compare them evenly.
We'd like to thank Dave for joining us. Dave, can you tell our folks where they can find you and follow you?
FourthHorizonCinema.com is the website, and Twitter. If you get me on Twitter, my handle is simply Dave Campfield, one word, DAVE. And if you're interested in hearing the Awaken the Reaper audio production, you can send me a message at Twitter. And I was also the host of the Trauma Now podcast, many of which for Lloyd Kaufman, many of which are archived on YouTube.
Nice. As the conductor blares all aboard, you are reminded of just how much you hate commuting from town to town on a train, especially when one of the passengers wants you to commit a murder for a murder. Though it could be worse, you could be stuck in a carpool. So the next time you are online planning your next trip, or even looking into innovative ways to plot a murder, you might want to go on to llpodcast.com, where you will find all of our social and podcast platforms. Check out our past episodes, become a patron, as well as read our reviews of books to screens and everything in between. Continuing our theme for the month, Hitching on a Master, we will be covering the Mel Brooks films High Anxiety and Blazing Saddles. Once again, we'd like to thank you for downloading, liking, and sharing the Literary License podcast. Thanks, folks, for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Now get shaved before your father gets home.
I'm sick and tired of bowing and scraping to the king.
No. Now let's not lose control. Come see my painting.
Haven't seen you in a week. I thought I needed time to think. Kept your picture in my pocket. Doesn't that mean something? Baby, tell me if it's too late. Too late to end to stop this fight. Kept your sweater to wear it, sleeping in it every night. Can we go back to say you're mine? Can't be a friend, I can't pretend that I'm fine seeing you with another love. Do you ever think of us? Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Haven't seen ya in a month now. Wonder if you're missing me. Would you ever break the silence? Aren't you tired of running free? Can we go back to say you're mine? Can't be a friend, I can't pretend that I'm fine seeing you with another love. Do you ever think of us? Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Oh, I know that it hurts, but we're making it worse if we get any closer. Yeah, I know that it hurts, but we can't make it work, 'cause the fire's out, we turn to dust. Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to strangers. Too late to fight it, who's gonna save this? And just like summer turns to fall, we turn to strangers. Our story changes, we turn the pages. As our walls come tumbling down, we turn to
Forgotten all
strangers.
about that silly little plan of yours.
Which one?
About blowing up the White House.
Oh, Ma, I was only fooling. Besides, what would the president say?
You're a naughty boy, Bruno. When you can always make me laugh.